All right, Mr. Mayor, you're good to go.
Thank you, Megan. Good evening, and I'm calling the meeting of our study session to order September 19, 2022, the City of Burlingame City Council. And with that, we will have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien.
Present.
Councilmember Beach.
Present.
Councilmember Colson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Here.
Mayor Ortiz.
Present. Thank you. And with that, we will move on to our staff report and communication. And I believe it's our Sustainability Program Manager, Ms. Segal Michael.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'll start off with sharing my screen with the presentation. And please confirm everyone sees it. Okay, great. Thank you for having me tonight. We're here to discuss our REACH code update. Some of you may vividly remember the last time we talked about this, but if you could believe it, it's been 3 years, which means that our current REACH code will expire at the end of this year. That's because it's tied to the building code updates that we do every 3 years. And once those expire, unless we readopt our REACH code, it will expire as well. So we're here tonight to talk about what we want our REACH code to look like. Back when we did it 3 years ago, the main goal of it was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the building in new construction. And while that's still one of the primary goals of the REACH code, today I also believe that it's a way to make sure the city is prepared for future policies. There's been a lot of action on the state level in the last 3 years. And specifically, I'm referring that we'd want to make sure we align with the state's executive order to be carbon neutral by 2045 and to meet anticipated EV charging demand with the governor's ban on sale of new gas vehicles in 2035. So tonight I'll be talking about building electrification and EV infrastructure. If you recall, in our original REACH code, we also have a section about solar, but that is now required by every building with the California code, so we no longer need to address it in REACH codes. So I'd like to just start with an idea of reminding people what we're talking about when we say building electrification. It's basically about switching our appliances to be all electric appliances and not to burn gas as a fuel. This is just a slide to show where that most of the burning of fuel happens in space and water heating in residential and commercial, a tiny bit in cooking and clothing dryer for residential, and a bit more for commercial. And this is to familiarize what these appliances look like, not that different from what we're used to. And I thought it'd be interesting to see what's happened to date with our REACH codes since being adopted in Burlingame. And to date, we have 69 single-family home projects that have gone through the building permit that have needed to comply with the REACH code. There's been 41 exceptions for cooktops, 29 for a gas fireplace, fire pit, or barbecue. 19 homes are all electric, thanks to the REACH code, and 8 single-family building permits are under review. Now, I think when I first saw these numbers, I was a little surprised because, there's a lot of construction happening in Burlingame, but a lot of those projects went through before the REACH codes, and a lot of those projects are going through now through the building. It takes about 3 years to plan one of these large projects. So these large developments that we're reading about in the news on the Bay Shore or large multifamily projects still to come, the REACH code will apply to those, but we haven't really seen a large project yet with the REACH code. So our options for REACH code to try and adopt one before the end of the year is I'm looking for direction and guidance from the council and to bring a proposed REACH code in the next month or so in order to be adopted by the end of December. So what we're talking about is all electric new construction, which we're familiar with. So the top here shows our current REACH code. And then we are looking, as we did last time, to Peninsula Clean Energy for recommendations. Peninsula Clean Energy has partnered with other energy providers in the area to create a Bay Area Reach Code model or cohort, and they've come up with model code for cities to point to. So what they recommend is you'll see for multifamily and commercial buildings, there's no change because the brunt of the work, our reach code right now is pretty far reaching. The only change that they recommend that we currently don't have is to remove the allowance of methane gas for cooking in fireplaces. Now, sure, that will take, instead of thinking about it as, taking a little bit more of the greenhouse gases from single family homes by avoiding the burning of gas, I see it as setting up our residences for future success. We're hearing that appliances, gas appliances may be prohibited in the future, that PG&E is very supportive of electrification. They may be investing less in gas infrastructure, and just the accessibility to gas and every infrastructure and appliances may be lessened in the future. So this would be setting up our residences for what's to come. Next, on EV infrastructure, I think it's always interesting to see where we're at with our current public EV charging stations. You'll see there's been an increase. There's definitely still, there's still a lot of capacity at these chargers. They're not at full capacity, but it's nice to see that there's been quite an increase even between the last 2 years at each of our station areas. So what PC again is proposing for EV infrastructure up here is our current code. Over here, I put a little key because it gets awfully confusing, all the different terminology. But what PCE is, the model code is proposing no changes for single family homes. All new single family homes need to have one level 2 and one level 1, and level 1 is an outlet. And for multifamily buildings and commercial buildings, essentially what they're doing is increasing capacity for level 2 charging. Level 2 is like your dryer plug. So for multifamily, instead of 10%, we're moving to 40%. And instead of 90% of just an outlet, it would then be 60%. Another option, and we feel there's a lot of flexibility in this, depending on a multifamily building, they can decide to do higher all level 2 charging stations. It would just require more power. We also think we could build in options, for a fast charger to offset some of these level 2s. So there's some flexibility here. And then for offices, the percentages increase too, from 10% to 20 and 30, and then from 6 to 5 to 10. Okay. So prior to today, we met with stakeholders, local developers, to basically hear what they have to say about these reach codes. Now they're in every city along the peninsula. People are becoming familiar with them. Every other city is now in the process of updating them as well. So we had a meeting on August 9th. We had a great turnout. 25 developers came representing single family, multifamily, and commercial. And here I summarize some of the bigger comments that we got. So by far, the number one question we got over and over is this first one: which projects would the reach codes apply to? And we confirmed that it would apply to projects whose initial submittal is after December 31st, 2022. We got a couple of questions about the backyard use of gas for fire pits, and if propane tanks would really make more sense. And yes, gaslight installation costs more than propane, than changing out your propane tank. And also, like I said earlier, the intention is to avoid investing in these assets that may be stranded in the future. Fireplace technology is not yet ready, we heard, especially for single family homes. It's still a growing industry. As demand grows, more options will be offered, but there is a wide variety available today with heating settings. Then there's the concern, especially due to what's been happening this summer, about power outages. And like we see, power outages generally occur during peak air conditioning periods, which is unrelated to changing out heating water and heating space with heat pumps for gas, for electric usage over gas. And then most of the time, power outages affect mixed fuel and all electric buildings equally, because many of those gas appliances need still electricity to be used. And PCE is growing its battery storage program. Even the Burlingame SunShares program that we're currently offering is offering discounts both for solar and battery storage. So that's strengthening. We had a comment about allowing for fast chargers to offset level 2 requirements. We agree. And that why are we looking so heavily at level 2? Well, that is the most cost effective, I would say, charging that exists currently. And even if that technology changes, the part that costs a lot of money to retrofit a building is bringing that power capacity in the wiring. If that's done beforehand during construction, it's significantly more efficient than if chargers are brought in after construction. I think it's sometimes helpful to see where we stand compared to other cities. This is by no chance comprehensive, but right now, if we were to adopt our existing REACH codes, which are strong codes, we would be where San Carlos and Brisbane is. Several cities, and this isn't comprehensive, but City of San Mateo, County of San Mateo, and Redwood City have REACH codes with no cooking exception for single family homes. So it's all electric for everyone. And then we have Menlo Park, which is already looking at how to decarbonize existing buildings by 2030 and are developing plans for that. And I also want to share, that while REACH codes are one of our strongest tools for new buildings, we are doing a lot. There is a lot happening in this field right now. We have our induction cooktop loaner program that's been popular from the get-go. This year, we're starting a new pilot where we're waiving the permit fee for new heat pumps for residents who want to change theirs out. We are following by example and installing heat pumps in the library, parks, yard, and police station. We have new EV charging stations at the community center. There is a snapshot of it. There is rebates from Bay Rent and PCE that we've been offering. 12 rebates to this past year have been applied for in Burlingame. We are hearing a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act. It's going to have a huge impact on investments and tax credits. The Air District is considering rules to prohibiting sale and installation of gas appliances, and cities are considering policies for existing buildings, which I'd be happy to do a future study session on if there's interest on that. So that's the end of my presentation. Joe McCluskey is our green building specialist. He won't be available tonight to answer questions, but we should have staff from PCE on the call if any technical questions come up. And then this is a snapshot from our electric fireplace in the community center.
Very nice.
Just to close up, I'd appreciate any direction and guidance on what kind of REACH code you would like to see me bring forth.
Thank you, Ms. Michael. Great presentation and lots to talk about. So let me open up for questions from colleagues. Any colleagues, anyone with questions on Ms. Michael's presentation? And I see a hand by Council Member Colson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sikal, really appreciate you working so closely with our people at PCE. They're great. You're terrific. So in reading through this, what about burnout ordinances? What do you think about those? And then my second one is garden equipment.
Okay, so your first question is about burnout. That is basically cities saying when they no longer want natural gas running through their cities.
Or I thought it was also like if your dryer breaks,
Oh, yes, you're right.
you replace it with,
You're right. I am mixing. I may be, but yes,
okay.
like maybe
So-
once you
Once your gas cooktop needs to be repaired or replaced, you're required to replace it with electric. Is that right?
yeah, and that's that is hitting more on existing building policy to deal with the appliances that are in existing buildings. But yes, that's one way to do it, either by time that they need a permit or time that they need replacement.
And are we thinking about any of that, or is this just all new construction?
And tonight, the intention is to focus on new construction, but it doesn't mean the door is closed on existing buildings. It's just, I didn't talk about it tonight, but that could be something that is included separately later, either a study session, or I'd be happy to present on that as well, because there is a lot of activity around that right now.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And to ask also about, did you say garden equipment? That is the state ARB has a mandate for no new gas landscape equipment by 2025 for sale. It doesn't mean the end of use, but there will no longer be new landscape equipment being sold that uses gas.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Any other questions? Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for all of us and for the public. Can you remind us, and maybe this is for Director Gardner, since we're talking about new building codes, what constitutes new building for a major renovation? What's the percentage of a major renovation that would trigger implementing these new building codes, or is that a separate discussion?
So what we have in the existing code is, and this also applies to other building code matters, it's not just for the REACH code, but the threshold is 50% of the value of the existing house. And now that's not land value, it's just the structural value. So we typically will do a per square foot calculation. Let's say the house comes out as the structure is worth $500,000. The magic number would be 250,000. So if the new addition were to be worth more than $250,000, then we would consider that to be a major renovation, and then the REACH code would apply. We did have a sort of carve out in the current code where if the kitchen or the mechanical systems were not being touched, then there could be some discretion. But I will say from experience, typically in these big major renovation projects, the kitchen is usually the first thing that gets touched, and often the HVAC system as well is part of it. So, but that is the threshold.
Thank you. And thanks to Ms. Michael for the really thorough staff report. A lot of questions as I was reading were answered as I kept reading. So very, very thorough and great presentation tonight.
Thank you. Colleagues, anything else? I do have a question. And again, just by observation, it just seems that our EV stations seem to be underutilized. How does our utilization compare to other cities?
I haven't compared it. I would have to think about how to do that, maybe to contact other cities and get their dashboard numbers too. But yeah, I would guess it's about, I wouldn't assume that we're far underutilized in any other city, but thinking about our cities, San Mateo has many more chargers than us, but they're a much larger population. And Millbrae, I don't have quite a sense of their chargers, but I could look into it and get back to you.
Very good. Yeah, I'm just curious. And again, when I drive by the ones on Chula Vista, I've never had an issue with backing up and charging there, or at our new parking structure, or it just seems like they're always available. So good for me, but I'm just curious when we're looking to require more of them to be built. So I see Councilmember O'Brien.
Yeah, so my question actually is more probably futuristic conversation, but when we were talking about existing homes. And, if something goes out, you replace it with electric. But my question, just to kind of ponder, futuristically, Segal, when we do talk about this futuristically, is many of those older homes won't have enough capacity in their panels for electricity. And then they're also, if you don't have plugs in the right places, then you're going into your walls and doing electrical. So there's going to be, if there's conversation futuristically, that really increases the price tag when it comes to existing homes versus, the new homes. At least new homes, you know what you're getting into before you start. But with existing homes, that's completely different.
I will say the city of San Mateo is also tonight presenting to their city council about beach codes, and they are looking at existing buildings. And some of their policies that they're considering is if a existing home is to do a panel upgrade, then that they should already grow it and add the breakers for future electric appliances. Or if a home is changing out their gas stove for a gas stove, while they do that, to make it electric ready and put in the plug for a future electric appliance. And the same for heating and with the furnace and water heating and space heating, to make it electric ready for the future when you're already doing work. And they've shown that that doesn't add too much cost to just prepare.
It's not, I don't think it's as easy as that. I think, when you do replace certain things in older houses, if you do not have that capacity, it is going to cost a lot more. And I do worry too about our senior citizens who are on fixed incomes, and that, if they get appliances that, go out, they're not going to be able to afford to do these upgrades. So I think the cost really you need to keep it in mind with these existing older homes. It's not that easy.
Okay, guys, just as a reminder, what we're discussing tonight
Right,
and
it's
on
new,
the agenda is,
I
so
know
if we're going to talk about that in the future study session, then we could bring up all those issues. But right now, I think we're just kind of veering away from what we have on the agenda. So if we could just stick to new construction, then that'd be great. Councilmember Brown.
I have one more question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. In regards to the fireplaces, so to change those to electric, I've done research on those electric fireplaces. The problem with it, a lot of those electric fireplaces are more for show, and they don't really disseminate the heat. So I get concerned. I do like some exceptions at this point, because I don't think our technology has caught up with the optimal usage of something. So if you're going to pay for something, you want it to work correctly. So if you want an electric fireplace, well, I'd want an electric fireplace that actually, disseminates heat, not for show. So, how does that get incorporated?
Yeah, I will say, I think for new homes, I think maybe fireplaces are relied on heat maybe for existing homes, but in new construction, fireplaces they don't tend to be counted on for heating the home. It's also for ambiance or the environment, and less for actually heating the home, because new homes have such great insulation, and they'll have all electric heating, and other great efficiencies in it. So that's why I don't see it as big of an issue for new homes to have a fireplace that the heating may not be its strongest quality. But I do think that is changing.
Thank you.
Wait, yeah, I thought I read on your report that was one of your FAQs that, anyway. Okay, but we'll go to, do you have anything else, Councilmember O'Brien?
Nope.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to second Councilmember O'Brien's comment that when we look at older buildings, we do need to think about that, because it is too, if you have to put in a new panel, that's several $1,000s. It's not just a fuse or something. But on this particular memo, one, I don't know whether Councilmember Colson meant to imply it, but I certainly would be very willing to look at advancing Gardner requirements ahead of the state. So Director Segal, you answered Councilwoman Colson by saying, the state's going to take it in 25. I wouldn't mind looking at that sooner, Mr. Mayor. So that's one comment. Could you, Segal, put up the matrix that shows, what we're requiring? Because I just want to be careful. I think sometimes we use the term L2 ready, and sometimes we use the term L2 installation. And I just want to be sure we're okay. Yeah, like this one. So I completely agree with you and with the thrust of this, that we should future-proof new construction, so that basically L2, as I understand anyway, is a 220 outlet as opposed to a 110. And so if we make sure that 220s are running to where there may be chargers in the future, I think that's a good thing to require. Where we're requiring L2 charging stations, that's making a decision about what is best. And so I just wanted to look at this more carefully. I guess we're committing offices, for example, to creating some L2 chargers, but otherwise having more of them ready to go. So that makes sense. I just wanted to be sure we were using the terms, we were consistent, L2 ready versus actually L2 installation. But mostly what we're requiring is that new construction be L2 ready, right?
Yes, that there's an actual outlet ready to be plugged into.
Okay, well, right, a 220 outlet that you
Yes.
can. Okay, good. I'm good with that. I just wanted to be careful about that. And two other quick comments. Maybe this was supposed to be questions. I'm sorry, but since I've got the microphone, I agree with Mayor Ortiz that I'm a little concerned about the lack of use, especially like of Chula Vista, and I think it's important to know where we stand on usage versus other cities, because if just as an example, an awful lot of our citizens already charge at home, then it would call into question spending a lot more public money to create a lot more public chargers that don't get used. So, and I don't think I want us to go green as fast as possible, but we still need to be smart about where we invest. So I do think that data will be helpful to answer Mayor Ortiz. And then finally, and this is a little off topic, but we did receive a request, and I know Councilwoman Colson knows this better than I do, from some residents about actions that the CPUC is taking, perhaps to dissuade solar. This is not the place to debate that, but I do think you're the person to help run that to ground with the PCE people. And, again, we haven't briefed it, so we can't really talk about it, but it does seem to me that we want to do it. In Burlingame, we want to be seen as supporting green infrastructure, because that is the future. And that's what we have to do for all sorts of reasons. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody, Councilmember Colson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just responding to the Vice Mayor's question, I did run this up the flagpole at Peninsula Clean Energy with Jan Pepper and our group. We're actually having our strategic planning session for the year is going to be this Thursday. I'll invite you all to attend. It starts at 5:30. It's online on Zoom. You can come and watch, or you can watch the recording. But in talking to them, I did ask about that exact question that you raised, Vice Mayor. And I was assured by our legislative team that we're going to be on it. We're going to be watching it. And if there comes an opportunity for us to participate in a letter or a writing or a campaign, that they will reach out to us and help us craft that and keep us on top of it.
Okay, colleagues, just a reminder, again, we're just talking about reach codes for new construction, so let's try to keep on topic. With that, Councilmember O'Brien.
Yes, no, of course you mentioned new construction, so, but I just have a quick comment. Since Vice Mayor Browner brought it up, the EV chargers, I do think they are underutilized, especially Chula Vista, but I do think they're in time when we have more housing built and you have more employees coming into the city of Burlingame, they may be used more often where, you have people coming over for lunch or whatever, or shopping, and they want to charge their vehicles. I mean, I find that convenient that I may not have done it at home, but I'm driving the car and I stop somewhere and it's like, oh, if there's one available and I can go in and, do some shopping or eat for 2 hours, great. You get a charge out of it. So I do think, yes, you're right. They're underutilized probably right now, but I think futuristically, especially with the legislation changing, that, gas cars aren't supposed to be made, beyond, is it 2030 or 35?
35.
35. That will change. So I'd rather be prepared for that influx, because it's going to happen, than not be prepared and be looking around for EV chargers.
Great. Colleagues, anybody else want to talk about new construction? Okay, so with that, then maybe we will, Councilmember Colson, I see an analog.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just also wanted to say with regard, I also believe with regard to new construction, there's Peninsula Clean Energy is doing some research and work on the panel upgrades in some of the work that they're doing in communities of lower income communities. So I cannot recall exactly what the answer was to it, but I do think there is something. So maybe Sigal, we could try to track that down to help understand what the data is around that.
Very good. Okay, so guys, let's open it to members of the public. And I really ask members of the public to remember this is all about new construction. My colleagues and I have brought up issues that are not related to this issue, but please, 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 let's try to stick to what's on the agenda. So with that, Megan, you're in charge.
We received a bunch of emails, but most of them were sent directly to the council. So I will read the emails that were sent to public comments, of which we got 2. First one's from Doug. He says, as a Burlingame resident, it is deeply important to me that the city continues to apply a REACH code in its building standards to help Burlingame reduce its greenhouse gas emissions and meet its climate goals. I urge the council to adopt the Bay Area REACH Code Group's new model REACH Code to remove the allowance of methane gas for indoor and outdoor cooking and fireplaces in single-family homes. Houses that rely on gas as their cooking fuel produce carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, methane, and many other harmful components in those homes. Complete building electrification is a key part of reducing emissions while creating healthier homes. Building entirely electric homes from the start is also cheaper than integrating fossil fuel appliances into construction. And as we've seen with the war in Ukraine, relying on natural gas leaves residents open to global price spikes and shortages. The second email we got was from Megan, and she says, this is a public comment regarding the September 19th study session. As part of the Burlingame community, I thank you for your leadership in climate action in our state and in the country. I ask you to continue the city's leadership by taking the strongest steps possible to ensure we decrease greenhouse gas emissions urgently and to support residents to take the electrification actions needed. It is clear that climate change is here with the record-breaking drought and ever-increasing smoke seasons each year. We have no time to waste in cutting down our impact on the climate. I'm a 27-year-old woman grappling with the fact that if I bring children into this world, they are entering a world in crisis due to this unprecedented and man-made change. Therefore, I urge you to consider adopting the full model REACH code, particularly to eliminate the exception offered in single-family homes to allow natural gas for cooking and fireplaces in new buildings. Since Burlingame is so built out, I also urge you to consider for existing buildings adopting a policy requiring homes to replace equipment with all electric options when the current gas equipment fails. Finally, I ask you to continue increasing EV charging capacity of all new buildings. 2030 is closer than we think, and according to the IPCC, we only have the next several years to curb emissions drastically and avoid the worst of the climate crisis. We must act now. And then I see 2 hands raised. So the first one is Raphael. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. Raphael, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hello, this is Rafael Reyes.
Hello, Mr. Reyes, we can hear you.
And I apologize, I'm sitting in on another council meeting as well. If the question could be repeated, I'd be happy to respond.
Oh, we're in public comment and your hand was raised.
Oh, I had not intended to raise my hand, but I'm sitting in, listening into the discussion and was available for questions. My apologies for raising my hand accidentally.
No worries. Thank
Thank
you.
you. We stand by. We might call on you. Thank you.
The next is, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but Dashiel.
Hello. You did, but that's okay. My name is Dashel Leeds. The I is silent, so it's very confusing. I'm the conservation organizer for the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter. We're in strong support of the Bay Area Reach Code's model Reach Code for new development. And I want to talk a little bit about why I think eliminating some of the exemptions, particularly for something like gas cooking, is really, really impactful and just extremely important. And that is because a lot of the emissions associated with natural gas or fossil gas come from the fugitive emissions that leak all the way from extraction to transit to use in our homes. And so, you know, a home may have one gas cooktop, but the line that's required to keep the gas active in that home is going to be consistently leaking emissions. And it is these persistent emissions that make gas worse than coal in terms of its greenhouse gas effect. So thank you so much for considering this update to the REACH codes. We're really excited to see the adoption of REACH codes throughout our region. As was discussed earlier, San Mateo is currently considering a city council study session on electrification measures for existing buildings. I'm excited to hop back in that meeting in a couple minutes. And I really hope that you consider and adopt eventually the REACH codes for new construction and really eliminate those exemptions, and so that we can begin the important work of transitioning away from gas pipeline infrastructure and eventually decarbonizing our existing buildings. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our next hand is our former council member and mayor, Terry Nagel.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to point out that we are really heading in the direction of stricter state regulations regarding gas burning appliances. The Public Utilities Commission is poised to end subsidies to gas line extensions to customers, and the California Air Resources Board and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District are considering policies to ban the sale of new gas appliances. So you're really not doing your residents and business owners any favor by allowing them to continue to install new gas lines. With regard to the current REACH code regulation, I'm representing Sustainable San Mateo County in saying this. We really think you should eliminate the exceptions for gas stoves and fireplaces, because there is a long history of pollution with these devices. For example, a 2020 UCLA study found that children who grow up in a home with a gas stove are 42% more likely to develop asthma than those who don't. And a Stanford study published in January of this year found that the methane leaking from natural gas burning stoves inside US homes has a climate impact comparable to the CO2 emissions from about 500,000 gasoline powered cars. So you're not really going to be helping families by encouraging them to do this. Now, I know you have exceptions for restaurants, and I just want to say that if you continue to have exceptions, it would really be important to make sure that they do have, the panel ready for the transition, but also that they also have to prove why it is infeasible to use a electric stove. There are very few methods of cooking that cannot be done on electric stoves and cooktops. And it should require that people document why they can't do that and have it signed off by a chief building official. With regard to the electric vehicle infrastructure, our organization recommends that you follow the policies recommending in Peninsula Clean Energy's model code. And we hope that you will do this for the sake of your residents and business owners, because they are going to have to deal with this in the future, and it does not make sense to allow people to install more gas lines at a time when the state is really set on getting rid of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Nagel. I wonder if I could ask you a quick question before we move on. You mentioned the study comparing the gas stoves to, I forget what the number of cars, but it was a significant number. Can you repeat where that study came from?
It was from Stanford. It was published in January of this year, and it found that even when gas stoves are not turned on, they are leaking carbon dioxide emissions, and that is primarily methane, which is 80% more lethal than CO2 over a period of time. So it really is the cause of many health situations. And on top of that, there is the safety situation. We all remember the San Bruno explosion, right? So there's a reason why PG&E tells you to call before you dig. It's because the gas lines under our cities are very, very old. Some of them are more than 50 years old, and they haven't been well maintained, and they really are a liability. So if you can cap those gas lines, you are really going to have a safer home.
Yeah, not only because you might hit it, but because they're continuing to leak. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Well, next up is Mike McCord.
Thank you. I did send a letter to the council this afternoon. I don't know if you've seen it yet. It won't surprise you to know that I'm looking for a very assertive and aggressive reach code. I don't think we can work too hard to fight climate change. I want to add another thought in reference to the exclusion or the exceptions made for single family homes. I was somewhat amazed when I saw the stat that out of 69 new single family homes in the last 3 years, only 19 were all electric. So people are really taking advantage of that exclusion. And my feeling is, we shouldn't be building, the last generation of homes with gas lines. We shouldn't build a home in 2023 where we're going to be encouraging them to remove gas appliances in the next few years. And also, I'm sure the building departments would get pushed back if they said, no, well, here's the other thing. As I see it, a new family home in Burlingame basically means a tear down. We don't have a bunch of empty lots waiting for a home. It means somebody is buying up a home, a functioning home, just to tear it down, cart it off, and then build their dream home. I'm sure you would get some pushback, but I wonder if it would really be a deal breaker. If you told a potential buyer or a potential developer, if you tear this house down, you're going to build an all electric replacement. Is that really a deal breaker? Are they going to say, well, I'm not going to tear down a home in Burlingame? Well, for me, that's a plus, Either some other family, that home is not going to go vacant. Some other developer or family will buy that and build it all electric. Or maybe even a less affluent family will buy that home, live in it, and improve it over time, which is what so many of us did back in the area when we really had starter homes. So let's get rid of that exclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCord.
And next is Jason Mendelson.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Jason Mendelson. I'm the Chairman and President of Lee Mendelson Film Productions Incorporated, homed in Burlingame for the last 60 years. And I want to endorse what the previous three speakers have said, and that the reach codes are the only way to go, both in the new construction, but also in existing buildings. Minimize the exceptions. This is a great thing, and you can make it fun. You can make it fun for your residents with the induction stoves. You can make it fun for your businesses to learn about what they can do by going all electric. And I would encourage you to do whatever you can to get those codes through. Thank you very much.
And we have no more hands up.
Very good. Okay, guys, we just have 15 minutes to go through this. So if you guys don't mind, let's break it up a little bit here. Can we just start and let's talk about building electrification? So this one, really the only change between us and the PCE model is where they're asking us to remove the allowance for methane gas and for cooking and fireplaces. I know we had a lot of conversation about this and the last time we talked about this, and that was kind of a compromise that we arrived at. So what are your thoughts, colleagues? Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, I fully support PCE and their effort to develop these barrier reach codes with other experts in the industry. I think it was really new in 2020. I supported it then, but I think the community, there's a lot more awareness. I think we're ready to take that next step. I support doing this one very tangible thing that we can do at the local level to really make an impact on greenhouse gases. I think is powerful. So if you want to break it down, I'm happy to comment on EV infrastructure too, but I'll just leave it at that. And I think it's a really important, I think the point about the safety lines as well, for just for leakage and for, we are all concerned that PG&E isn't really investing what it needs to do in the gas lines for safety. I think this is a really the right thing to do locally. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember O'Brien.
And I will actually go the other direction and keeping it the way it is with the exceptions for the fireplaces and the cooktops.
Thank you. Councilmember Coulson, did you have a thought? You're muted.
Obviously, I'm on the PCE board and I've worked closely with Jan Pepper and our team there to and the CAC, which includes a number of Burlingame people, to help develop this code. And I think we've had the original work, and incrementalism is always good. So, you know, we've kind of started introducing it, and in 3 years now, I think you're starting to see more and more homes go electric. So I'd be supportive of going to the all electric model.
Good. Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Mr. Vice Mayor.
I agree with Councilmember Beach and Coulson.
I do too. So with that, I think that again, I really struggled with this one last time. I think we've seen a lot of changes, and I think the adoption of all electric in other cities has been pretty comfortable. It hasn't been as difficult as I expected it to. So I am also in favor of the PC code. So I think you have a pretty strong opinion here. So now let's move on to EV charging, because I think that was also pretty controversial back. So single family homes, we are with the PCE model. So let's talk about multifamily. Right now, what we have is 10% of L2 and 90% with L1 ready. These are all L2 ready and L1 ready and conduit for future L2. PCE is now saying that the PCE model is 40% with L2 charging stations. So that's not ready. Those are actual stations, correct? Segal?
Yes, that's correct.
Very okay. So that's not only a difference in the percentage, but it's also a difference in the one is ready, so wired for it. The other one is actually the station is ready to go. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Or high power 15% L2 charging stations, or 85% L2 charging stations. So colleagues, on this issue, what's the thoughts? And they changed.
Oh, can I I wanted to clarify for the multifamily buildings, the low power, high power, this could be an option for buildings to choose between. We don't need to pick one or the other of these two. This would be a multifamily building could decide if they want to go the low power route or a high power route, depending on the power capacity.
Got it. Okay, and if I recall, the big objection that our developers had with this was the transformers and where the location, how much they would take up space for the construction. That's why we came up with our compromise. So With that, colleagues, any thoughts on this issue? I don't see any hands, so
I'm
just
happy to go. I have a
go,
hand.
go.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. So we've done a lot of work and research on this at Peninsula Clean Energy. We've worked with a lot of developers and studied it. And given that it will be much less expensive to retrofit all these if we just go ahead and get them at least ready and give them the option of the low power or the high power. So I'll support this because I believe, this is, again, where the developers are probably going to try to go anyway to meet demand.
And to be clear, you supporting the PCE model versus what we have right now?
Yeah. Moving to the PCE model, giving the option of the low or the high power.
Very good. Okay. Colleagues, any other thoughts? We're just trying to give staff direction, so we need to hear from you as to how you feel about this. Councilmember O'Brien.
So just a question, this is only for new construction, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I'm fine with that.
Me too.
Okay. Councilmember Beach.
Yep, I support it. I think also, we're just future proofing. Like we said, I'm heartened that the greatest growth in our existing chargers is actually downtown Broadway, right near residential. So I think we've got a future proof. And there's a great article in the Mercury News this weekend about how, the grid can support all this new charging infrastructure. Experts have studied it. We need this direction we need to go. So I do support it. Thanks.
Excellent. Could we go back to that slide that we had on? I think that was very helpful to have it there.
Sorry
because
about
the last issue here that we have is the commercial buildings. And then we're going from 10% L2, 10% L1, to 20% and 30%. L2 charging station, L2 capable. So colleagues, thoughts on the commercial?
Yeah, just to clarify, capable means that there's power and conduit running, but no actual way to plug in. It would be just for the future installation.
So okay, and I'm sorry, the 20% is of what?
Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't clear. Of parking spaces.
Okay, so we're saying basically every office building would need to provide 20% of their parking spaces with charging stations and wire 30%, an additional 30%.
Yes.
Okay, colleagues, any thoughts on this?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I would endorse this approach. I put a lot of reliance on two things. One, the work that the experts have done, as Councilwoman Colson has reported, and two, the fact that we have a number of developers who pay very close attention to what's going on, and they haven't complained or raised any significant concerns about this. I think they see this as something their employees are going to want in the future. So I endorse this.
That's a really good point. That it is a selling point for the developer. So that's a very good thought. Anybody else? Okay, so let's just talk about how we each feel about this one, so we can give staff a little direction. I'm going to agree with the vice mayor that sounds reasonable. Councilmember O'Brien.
I'll go along with that too.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands. Do I see any other? Are there any other? Yeah.
Agree. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. So I think we have 5 for 5 on those three. So that should be pretty straightforward. And I think you guys, we have 5 minutes to go till our regular council meeting. Staff, if you could just let me know, Sigal, if that's sufficient direction. I think that was pretty loud and clear.
That was loud and clear, and I'm also very excited, and thank you for being so supportive. And I look forward to putting this reach code together for you to review and adopt in the next coming months.
Your presentation was very powerful, obviously. So thank you very much. And with that, we have a few minutes before our council meeting. So if we can, we're going to call this one adjourned, and we'll move on to that one at 7 o'clock. So thank you all for a quick, good discussion.
Is it the same link, Megan, or a different link?
Yes, stay on.
Oh, just stay on. Okay.
Same link.
Sorry, did you say new link, Megan?
Nope,
No,
same.
same thing.
Same link.
And Megan, we're just recording. I don't have to wait for you.
Correct. Let's just wait till 7 though.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor. You're muted.
Man, and I was doing so well. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the City Council meeting for September 19th. We call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. And with that, we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a special guest tonight to do our Pledge of Allegiance. It's Ava Geary, who has been an intern with our city clerk. So please, Ms. Geary.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, and we will be hearing from you in the next few minutes, so glad to have you here with us. Madam City Clerk, if we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien,
Here.
Councilmember Beach,
Here.
Councilmember Coulson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Here.
Mayor Ortiz.
Here. And with that, we'll move on to report out from a closed session, but did we have a report from a closed session? We did not, so we will skip that one. Upcoming events, I did receive something from our Parks and Rec director who reminded me that we have Friday Campout on Friday, and it includes a, go figure, and it includes a movie the community is welcome to join. So the movie is Parent Trap, and it starts at sunset. Also the annual Muddy Mile is Saturday, October 1st. There's still time to sign up. Call the Parks and Rec at 558-7300. Thank you. And colleagues, anybody have any upcoming events? And I don't see any hands, so we will move on to item number 6, which is presentation of a proclamation.
I'm so sorry. May I please, Mayor?
Oh, please, of course. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I didn't get my hand up fast enough. I did just want to reiterate in this bigger public meeting, that Peninsula Clean Energy will be having their annual strategic planning session on Thursday night at 5:30. You can go to the website and look. Everyone is welcome to attend by Zoom. And we will be reviewing our 24/7 model for energy delivery, as well as a number of other very strategic and important initiatives that the organization is pushing for the next year. So thank you for anyone who would like to join.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson, and thank you for your service on PCE. We really appreciate your work. And with that, we will move on to presentations. We have a proclamation recognizing High School Voter Registration Week. And Megan, you'd like me to read it first, and then we will pass it on to you?
Exactly.
Very good. So here we go. Recognizing High School Voter Registration Week. Whereas the city of Burlingame joins cities, schools, and organizations across the county in recognizing September 19th through September 23rd September 23rd, 2022 as High School Voter Registration Week. And whereas the right to vote is central to who we are as a nation. It defines us as America, and serve as a foundation for our liberty. And whereas the right to vote freely and fairly and to have our vote counted is sacred and fundamental part of our nation's character. And whereas in the 2014 general election, only 52% of eligible California youth were registered to vote, more than 20 points below in any other age group. And only 8% of eligible youth age 18 to 24 voted, while during the 2018 general election, youth registration in California increased to 61.6%, and youth voter turnout increased significantly to 27.5%. And whereas the state of California allows individuals who are age 16 and up to pre-register to vote, and whereas the Generation Voter, a youth voter initiative sponsored by the city clerk's office, is working to ensure that we send our students to college with everything they need to vote, registered, educated, and eager. And whereas the Generation Voter has held 3 successful voter registration drives at Burlingame High School, registering and pre-registering 260 students, and has created a voter registration drive toolkit to enable students at other high schools to run successful drives. And whereas this foundation, it it is fundamental to the success of our city, country, state, and count. I'm sorry, let me do that again. It's fundamental to the success of our city, county, state, and country that we foster in the next generation the importance and excitement of being able to vote. And whereas Generation Voter has set up voter registration tables for the week at BHS Library, the city's main library, and at the community center. Now, therefore, I, Ricardo Ortiz, Mayor of the City of Burlingame, do hereby recognize September 19th through the September 23rd as High School Voter Registration Week. Thank you, Megan, and that is very impressive, everything that you guys have done. And with that, I hand it to you to introduce our guest tonight.
Yeah, we have two students. They can turn their cameras on, Sylvie and Ava. They have been working with me for Generation Voter. It's been an amazing experience getting to watch their creativity and their excitement about getting their fellow students registered to vote. So we really just wanted to take time out this week to talk about the importance of voting, and especially in getting our students registered before they fly the coop and leave for college. So Ava or Sylvie, who would like to go first? Ava?
Sure, I'm happy to start us off. Good evening, my name's Ava, and I'm so glad to be representing Generation Voter tonight alongside Sylvie. I started this project almost 2 years ago with my sister Ella and Megan, our Burlingame City Clerk. Today marks 50 days until the November election, when a variety of national, state, and local issues will all be on the ballot. Local elections, especially, are undervalued. Across the US, voter turnout locally hovers around 20%, meaning a handful of votes can swing elections. Every vote really counts. So much of our daily lives, the taxes we pay, the parks we enjoy, our community programming, our schools, is in the hands of local officials. Not everyone thinks politics is their thing, especially as I've talked to other high school students, and that's okay. I felt similarly a few years ago, but politics is who gets what and when, and voting affects every issue from the environment to the economy to education and health. Whether or not you have an impact on politics, politics will have an impact on you. There are also many people, especially teenagers, who want to vote but don't know how. I've met several wonderfully engaged teens leading rallies or lobbying government who didn't know they could pre-register to vote at 16, which would enable their ballot to be sent to them automatically when they turn 18. Our goal this week is to continue registering and pre-registering voters with free pop-up locations around the city. Today, we set up tables in the teen section of the public library, the community center, and the BHS library with everything students need to get on the rolls, and the streamers and glitter won't hurt. Thank you for listening, and happy voter registration week to you all.
Thank you, Ava. Sylvie?
Great job, Ava. Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvie Olson. I am also a student at Burlingame High School, and I've been fortunate to participate in the Generation Voter project that Ava and Ella Geary started. I am proud to be involved in an initiative that promotes voter engagement in the community. Walking down the halls of my high school, I hear classmates ask each other almost an exhausting amount, "Have you gotten your permit yet? Do you have your license?" I have yet to hear this level of enthusiasm directed towards registering to vote, for which the 16-year-olds of my class are eligible. Voting is important, the foundation of democracy. While I am unable to vote now, I await the day when I help decide who represents me. I want to be a part of electing the first female president. I want to be responsible for that change. Having all of these hopes for the future, I struggle to understand why those who hold such a power fail to exert it. In the most recent primary, San Mateo County had a 38% voter turnout. As a city with an abundance of resources, educational opportunities, and wealth, we set an example for others. Voting is a right, but more importantly, it is a responsibility. It is a commitment to our city and nation to recognize the voices of all, to represent our beliefs, values, and aspirations as a people. Regardless of who a person votes for, one votes to ensure a better future and a better world for ourselves and our children. So I ask you to set a good example this November by voting.
I mean, if these two don't get you to vote, I don't know what will at this point. Thank you, Sylvia and Ava, for your comments.
Thank you, Sylvia and Ava. And I don't know if any of my colleagues might be up. I see all the hands raised. So you guys have been very inspirational. I'm not surprised that my colleagues want to comment. I'm going to pass it on to the Vice Mayor, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was terrific. Thank you so much, Ava and Sylvia. And I completely agree. I think actually voting is like a habit. And if you don't get it early, you may never get it. So it's super important, the work you're doing. And my question for you, though, is this. You know, it's so hard. Young people are notoriously bad about showing up at the polls. And so I wonder, as you've gone around talking to young people, what have you found to be the most powerful argument? What's the one that most often gets them to stop and listen and think about it? I'm curious.
That's a really fair point. I think most people just don't know a lot about the process. It seems really tedious to register to vote, like there's a lot of paperwork. So I think it just seems kind of remote, or people feel like their vote won't make a difference. And so I think helping make it more accessible and nearer to people by talking about local issues that they care about, and really telling them that their vote does make a difference, and to tell them those numbers. Yeah, that's what I would say. Go ahead, Sylvie.
I actually was one of those people for a while before my history teacher just showed how passionate she was about this topic. I think that in high school, we worry so much, and there's so much pressure about the next biology quiz, or, you know, these tiny things that in decades, they won't matter. They don't affect everyone, right? But the history that has gone into giving us this fundamental right as a democracy, people don't understand that. And I just feel so grateful that this high school has, and this teacher of mine has given me this opportunity to really understand how I can make a difference, how this centuries or just like the American history has culminated in such a moral obligation that we need to vote. And not everyone understands that, because as a society, we don't show that from an early age.
I feel like saying, preach, sister.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
That was great. That was great. Councilmember Colson.
Well, thank you both so much. Hey, have either one of you, or together jointly, have you guys thought about putting the two speeches you just gave together and submitting them into the San Mateo Daily Journal as an op-ed piece? Because I think you would get it published. And I think Megan could help you craft it in such a way, and it would be very timely. My phone just pinged 2 seconds ago about voter registration week. And I would love you to do that, because I would love to send that on to some other young people, and we could amplify it through social media. That would be wonderful. And God bless high school history teachers.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. That really, somebody who really made a difference, because she got two people to really go out and make a difference themselves. So multiplying the effort. So that's a great story, Sylvie. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Ava. I see two more hands. So Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Ava and Sylvie for inspiring comments tonight. The website is fantastic. The voter sticker competition was amazing, but actually taking the voter registration to the people in the library, to the high school, to make it easy, like you said, to just, hey, register, here you go, fill out this paperwork. That is like the most powerful thing that really inspires me. And you're exactly right, Sylvie. How many people have fought for the right to vote? You're three, all of us women here, we've only had it for 100 years. Can you imagine if those women who fought for so long to get us the right to vote knew how complacent some people were right now? So it's awesome that you're out there fighting so hard for it. And thank you for keep up the great inspiring effort.
That's a great point. Councilmember O'Brien, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to thank you too for, it's so nice to see your enthusiasm. And hopefully that will, enthusiasm will spread through all, the young adults. And Sylvia, you actually bring up a really good point. All these kids get so excited, when they're they're taking the steps to get their driver's license. I mean, to me, taking the steps to vote is much easier than the steps you take to get your driver's license. So, I hope one day that, kids are as enthusiastic of, registering to vote than they are, driving. So I just thought it was a very good analogy that you brought up this evening. But congrats to you too. And I hope you can get, a lot more people on the bandwagon and have that, all of you have the same enthusiasm. So I really appreciate all the hard work that you've put into this.
Thank you for that. Okay, Ava, Sylvie, thank you so much for being here tonight. You guys have been a real inspiration. Really appreciate it. I keep thinking, how did I get my kids to be interested in politics? But they had to vote for me, or they keep telling me they voted for me. So that's how they did it. But thank you so much, guys. It was really inspirational. And I really, really want to second Councilmember Colson's suggestion of a op-ed. I'll be the first comment. So please do that. So thank you. And we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Yes, that's a great suggestion.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And with that, take a deep breath, and then we will move on to public comments. So these are public comments for items that are not on tonight's agenda. So please, if you have a comment about one of the agenda items, we will get to it. So with that, I will pass it on to our city clerk.
1 second. I just accidentally made Vice Mayor Brownrigg an attendee. So let me re-promote him.
He needs to learn how to behave.
Okay, he's back with us. Sorry about that. Vice
Oh,
Mayor.
he's gone sideways again.
Was I talking too much again?
I don't have any emails and I don't see any hands up. So I think we're good to go.
Very good. Then we will move on to item number 8, which is the approval of the consent calendar. And so, colleagues, does anybody have any items they wish to pull? Councilmember Colson, I see your hand up.
It's item 8G, please, the water report.
Very good. Councilmember Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Same one.
Okay, so we'll open it up for members of the public who wish to have any of the items pulled. Madam City Clerk.
I don't see any hands raised. Have one pulled.
Very good. So
Oh,
with that,
wait, actually, sorry. I do have, sorry. Thank you, Lisa. I missed we did have one public comment come in. So if you don't mind, Mayor Ortiz, I'll quickly read that one. Came in.
okay, so you're moving me back one spot on the agenda?
I am. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
This is from Sandra Lang. She says the recent extreme heat wave earlier during the September Labor Day weekend likely won't be the last extreme weather condition thrown our way. I'm requesting that the city develop a policy that includes identification / designate locations that requires publication ahead of an event. Not everyone has access to air conditioning or can be away from the area during such an event. Advance well-publicized information actually would be helpful for everyone, the public and the city as well. Excuse me. I want to add that this request is not limited to the cooling center issue alone. Such a policy should extend to storm-related events. Thank you for taking this under consideration.
Thank you. And I know that she has traded emails with our city staff, so that is something to think for in the future. So back to the consent calendar.
I don't have any hands raised, nor do I have any emails to pull anything.
Okay, colleagues, so I am looking for a motion to approve items number 8A, B, C, D, E, F, H, I, J.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Mayor Brownrigg, a second by Councilmember O'Brien. If we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien.
Aye.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Aye. And with that, we will move on to item number 8G. Since it was Councilmember Coulson who first pulled it, do we want to have a presentation from Mr. Martuza, or we just want to have a comment?
It's more just a question and a comment, and I'm certainly happy to cede to the vice mayor to start if he wants, because I
Well,
know.
let me just do this because Mr. Martuza is looking there ready to talk. So I'm going to let him do a short introduction so that we can take it from there. Mr. Martuza, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I also have with me in the team, Kevin Okada, Senior Engineer, Jennifer Lee, Environmental Manager that are part of this project, and they work on the water supply, demand, conservation. And additionally, I have a consultant team as well, just in case if there are any questions. Brief presentation is that the water supply assessments are required by a state water code, was adopted approximately 20 years ago. The primary purpose of the water supply assessment is to evaluate whether a project has sufficient water supply to meet all future demands during normal years and dry years for a planning horizon of about 20 years. The projects before you tonight have meet the threshold of the state law. And the approval of the water supply assessment is not an approval of the project. It's just a document that state requires to ensure that there is the city has looked at the project and determines that there is adequate supply or not. And these two projects have over 250,000 square feet of floor space, and that's one of the requirements. And for example, if you may remember, you may not recall that because the last water supply assessment was done as part of the Burlingame Point project in 2012 as part of the project EIR. It was not brought to the council as a separate document. It was all done together. So, but was approved by the council. So these two projects, essentially, I would like to summarize that the demand from these two projects are contemplated in the city's urban water management plan and updated water projections in the light of the RENA numbers and active conservation, which is being performed. And city has adequate water to supply these two projects during the normal years. And during the dry years, we looked at, the water supply with the Bay Delta, without the Bay Delta, and voluntary settlements that is being worked on as we speak by San Francisco Public Utilities Commission and BOSCA. So with the Bay Delta assumptions that have been provided to us by San Francisco, there will be significant shortages, but that would be addressed by the city's recently adopted water shortage contingency plan. Without the Bay Delta, there will be minimal shortages, manageable, that would be also addressed by the city's water shortage contingency plan. And voluntary settlements is with that, that would be within the goals and agreement of SFPUC, and the city would be able to manage it. And one thing to remember is that with or without these projects, the Bay Delta would have an issue in terms of city's future water supply, as provided to us by city and county of San Francisco, because they are the one supply the water and they tell us how much water is available. And so the recommendations made in the report are a good measure of practice. They are not to be approved as a condition of this approval tonight. Those recommendations will be considered as part of the city's environmental review and conditions of approval. So hopefully that is adequate, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martuza. Colleagues, any questions? Councilmember O'Brien.
Yes, so I have a question for you, Syed. The purple piping. So does that get self-contained within the project itself? And how does that hook up to the city system? Because for example, I know Redwood City, actually the city itself has quite a bit of the purple piping that they've integrated into their system. So how does that work if a city doesn't have it, but you have specific projects that have to provide it?
Thank you, Councilmember Mayor, Councilmember Keegan. The purpose of the purple piping is to have purple piping essentially installed in front of the project site, so that when the city is able to supply recycled water in the future, they are able to tap into that.
Right.
For example, currently we have a few projects that already have purple piping installed. One is the Burlingame Point project. They have installed purple piping. Also, the city's landfill. Currently, the top golf, the area where the top golf will be built, and all those landfill facilities do have capability to draw the recycled water because the purple piping is installed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question is, we seem to have, enough water when you kind of have your normal rainfall, and, we haven't seen that in a few years. So, the hypothesis is, of course, futuristically, we're going to see future years of dry winters. So my question to you is, how much more do you think we're going to be able to conserve? Because we have the voluntary 10% cuts now, and we're not making that 10%.
So one thing to remember is that, just to give you a brief history, the city's water use had peaked in 2007. The city was purchasing 1.6 billion gallons of water, in 2007 on an annual basis. But in the last 5 years, just in the past 5 years, the average water purchase the city is about 1.2 billion gallons. Okay, and so the city's agreement with San Francisco is to purchase 1.9 billion gallons. So 1.9 billion gallons. So we have a capacity of roughly close to 600 million gallons that city has. That is provided if there's no drought. However, during the drought, during the drought, that will be affected, and only water will be provided that is available. So in 2015, which was one of the worst years of the drought, since that time, the water demand is rising, but we are still, at 1.2 billion gallons right now, currently, compared to, back in the day. And so there is definitely, you're absolutely right, the water conservation is hardening. The capacity is very minimal. It's going to be hard for folks to conserve water unless drastic measures are taken. And the biggest way to save water is the outdoor irrigation cuts made, using less water for outdoor landscaping, and that's one of the areas. I'm pleased to share with you that the water efficiency is increasing even during the recent months. We used to have 138 gallons per capita per day in 2012, and now we have 107 gallons per day per capita just in 2020 numbers. That I don't have the data for exactly this month and this year, because it's being tracked. The lowest per capita that we measured was in 2016. That was 98 gallons per minute per day per person.
Okay, so is there a way that we can get the data on, usually, let's say at Bosca, you kind of get the total of the region of what's been saved, not the cities per se. Is there a way to get those numbers of the cities to really see, are all the cities carrying their weight, or are there cities that are doing much better than others? I'd be kind of curious on, where we sit in comparison to other cities?
There is a way to see that only when the agencies are reporting the numbers. That each agency reports to the state, and then the state tallies all the data and publishes that. And we don't know the timing of that. Also through BOSCA, BOSCA does an annual report. And as you know very well, being the board member of BOSCA, BOSCA also gathers information. We'll take a look into what BOSCA has and be able to see if we can give you a apples to apples comparison of other agencies and see how they compare to Burlingame.
Okay, great. I'd be interested in that because usually they kind of give the bulk number at the meetings and not separate the city. So if that is possible, I think it would be beneficial for the whole council to get that information at some point. Thank you.
I'll be happy to take a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bryan. Councilmember Colson.
Thank you. So just two comments. I was really intrigued reading this report, Director Murtuza. It's, it's contextual within the two developments, but the information about the Bay Delta plan and the diversion of water and the potential elements of things going on in the state, really opened my eyes as I was reading through this as to how susceptible we are going to be to state policy in the future. And I really appreciate and hope that in the next few years, we can focus on, again, water recycling. We'll have conservation. We're going to have, conservation per capita, but we're going to be growing both commercially and residentially. So I think that whole recycling water and reuse of water conversation at all levels of the city is going to be important. So I look forward to having that. And I also do just want to call out Councilwoman O'Brien for her work on BOSCA. And I know that she has enthusiastically worked to protect and make sure that the water resources that this city needs are going to be here for future housing and future development. So I appreciate that. And I don't know if most people don't know what it even is. So that's why I wanted to pull this off, just to have kind of highlight this a little more for the public. And again, doesn't matter. I don't care where you stand on these two plans. It's just really important to understand it and figure out how we're going to future-proof for water as well as electricity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Colson. Those are very important points, and I think we will be having more discussion about that. And I agree with you. I have to thank Councilmember O'Brien for her hard work on BOXO. So thank you for that. Do we have any other questions for our Public Works Director? I don't see any raised hands. So with that, actually, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So thanks to Councilwoman O'Brien for representing Burlingame and BOSCA. That's hard and detailed work. So the item here is, do these two large projects trip any wires in terms of water usage? And the conclusion is they don't, because we already budgeted for it, and that's the item. So I appreciate the item. I'm in complete support of the findings. And I remember that we went through all this analysis when we first went through the approval, so it doesn't surprise me. The part that I wanted to comment on is I am increasingly uncomfortable that we only listen to SFPUC about the impacts of the Bay Delta plan. My understanding is the Bay Delta plan has a lot of off-ramps when dry years continue one year after another. And so there is absolutely another side to this. And this notion that our staff report underscores that it's fish versus people, I think is really unfortunate and not a whole picture. So, and SFPUC has a very strong invested interest in their particular point of view, which is why they're being sued by the state. So I just think that this council, if we're going to delve into this and the implications for Burlingame, which I would be delighted to do, we should make a point of trying to hear from the other side of that equation, because I think there are way more safety valves and off-ramps than gets portrayed by SFPUC. And that's why I wanted to pull this off. I think it's an imbalanced report. because it only uses SFPUC's point of view. All that said, it doesn't matter because the two projects qualify, and that's all that this item is about. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. And with that, let's open it for the public comment. So Madam City Clerk.
I don't see anyone with their hand up, and I don't have any emails, so we're good to go.
Very good. We'll close the public comment and we'll bring it back to my colleagues. So any final comments, or anybody would like to make a motion to approve item number 8G?
I'm happy to make a motion to approve item number 8G.
I'll second.
And I'll second with a comment that I do think it's valuable for future discussions to just have as much balance in the report as possible. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I think I heard the Vice Mayor first, so I'm going to go.
No. Please allow Councilman Beach to the second.
Very good, Council. I have a motion by Councilmember. Now you guys switched all the windows on me here. Motion by Councilmember Colson, was it? And second by Councilmember Beach. Would we have roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Colson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Aye. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to item number 9, public hearings. And our first public hearing is a public hearing and adoption of a resolution approving the levying of downtown Burlingame Avenue Business Improvement District assessment for fiscal year 2022-23. And who am I handing this one off to? Hello, our Finance Director, Ms. Yu Scott. How are you?
Good evening, Mayor and Council Member. On August 15, 2022, the City Council adopted a resolution of intent to set an assessment for downtown Burlingame Avenue Business Improvement District for fiscal year 22-23 and establish a public hearing date and time for tonight. The assessment value for the entire district is about $80,000, which is used to provide business enhancement activity, events, and the publicity for business in the district. If there's pretext by business that represent a majority of value of the assessment, then the resolution cannot be approved. By 5 o'clock this afternoon, the city has received 1 protest out of 412 businesses. We can check with city clerk and see if any additional protests have been coming in since then. Megan?
I muted myself. We only received that one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Since the protest did not constitute a majority, staff recommend adopt a resolution and approve the assessment. This concludes my staff report, and I'm here to answer any question you may have.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions of our Finance Director? I don't see any hands raised. So with that, we can open it up to the public. So any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
I don't see any hands up, and I don't have any emails on this item.
Very good. And with that, we'll close the public comment or the public hearing, and we'll move to back to my colleagues. We don't have any protests, so I'm looking for a motion to adopt the resolution.
Mr. Mayor. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let's see. Councilmember Beach, why don't you go?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the resolution to approve and levy the 2022-23 assessments.
Great. Thank you very much. And Councilmember O'Brien, was that a second I heard?
Sure. Yep.
Very good. We have a motion by Councilmember Beach, a second by Councilmember O'Brien. If we could have roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Colson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to item number 9B, which is introduction of an ordinance adding chapter 6.25 to the Burlingame Municipal Code, establishing a program to regulate and permit sidewalk vending, amending chapter 6.24. Okay. I will pass it on to our city attorney to read the rest of that. Is that
Sure, I'll introduce the item and then I'll pass it on to Assistant City Attorney Scott Spansale. This is the introduction of an ordinance amending Chapter 6.25 of the Burlingame Municipal Code to establish a program to regulate and permit sidewalk bending. The CEQA exemption is exempt pursuant to state CEQA guidelines sections 15378 and 15061 sub B3. And as I said, Assistant City Attorney Scott Spansale will be handling the presentation, so I'll pass the mic over to him.
Thank you very much, Michael. I will pull up a brief presentation I have, so please let me know if you're able to see this here. Is that showing up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. It's great to see all of you. Would start by commending the mayor for reading the title, but I know it can get the best of us all the time. So thank you, City Attorney Pina, for that. And I know that title doesn't exactly scream excitement, but fortunately the subject matter of the presentation is pretty exciting. So thanks for bearing with me. So we're here tonight to talk about a proposed ordinance that would set up a program to regulate sidewalk vendors within the city limits. So I prepared this presentation to help walk us through the proposed regulations, and then we'll be prepared to answer any questions you may have. And with that, let's jump in. So in this presentation, we'll first talk about SB 946, which is the Safe Sidewalk Vending Law. This will hopefully aid us in understanding why the proposed ordinance is necessary and what sort of balance we're trying to strike in the regulations. Then we'll get into the ordinance itself, including the regulations proposed for these sidewalk vendors, as well as the rules around enforcement of sidewalk vending. And finally, we'll talk quickly about a new bill that may affect sidewalk vendors in the state, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. So the Safe Sidewalk Vending Act was signed by the governor back in 2018, and it immediately decriminalized sidewalk vending activities throughout the state. The law also imposed limits on a city's ability to regulate sidewalk vending, and it said that we can only do so when that restriction is directly related to objective health, safety, or welfare concerns. And no agency can impose a blanket ban on the activities. Rather, we can just make certain restrictions on the time, place, and manner of those activities. So the regulations we'll discuss in this presentation are aimed at both encouraging new small business activity and street vending, and also simultaneously safeguarding the health, the safety, and the welfare of the public. And before I really get into this, I do want to talk about the 4 key goals that we're really trying to do with this ordinance. The first is to ensure that there's no interference with police, firefighter, and emergency medical personnel, or the flow of traffic on sidewalks around any residence, public building, or public park. Second, we want to make sure we continue to provide reasonable access to sidewalks, pathways, including those pathways in public parks, traffic signs and signals, fire hydrants, restrooms, trash cans, firefighting equipment, and a whole host of other things. Third, we're trying to maximize public access to and among the main commercial districts in the city. And fourth, we're trying to reduce our exposure for the city to personal injury or property damage claims and litigation that could arise from the activities. So who and what does this ordinance regulate? Well, to answer that, I can read the legal definition, which is Government Code 51036. And that defines a sidewalk vendor as a person who sells food, merchandise, from a push cart, stand, display, pedal-driven cart, wagon, showcase, rack, or other non-motorized conveyance, or from one's person upon a public sidewalk or pedestrian path. Like all laws, that really makes no sense out of context. So that's why I've got pictures up. This definition would include individuals who run a jewelry stand, an ice cream cart, a fruit stand, a hot dog or elote cart, as well as a plethora of other merchandise that you've probably seen around other cities. So just about everyone selling items out of a cart or from a person on city sidewalks or a public pathway. Who doesn't it regulate? Well, it doesn't regulate mobile food vendors, which are covered under Burlingame Municipal Code 25.48.180. It's a little bit confusing because aren't carts mobile? Yes, they are. But the distinction here is that the proposed ordinance is regulating vending of non-motorized equipment. So the true push cart, someone pushing a cart on wheels, while the mobile food vending law that we have currently on the books covers those that are motorized. So those are the food trucks, the ice cream trucks that would have a driver and would go back to a public parking space after, or sorry, to a private parking space after. So what would this ordinance require? Well, as proposed, sidewalk vendors would need to apply for and obtain a sidewalk vending permit, which would be a new permit in the city, as well as a city business license. The application form would help us get an idea of the who, what, and where of the proposed vendor, including what they intend to sell and what path they would follow if they do move, as they are allowed to do under this ordinance. It would also explain the requirements of the permit, including the insurance and the indemnification requirements, which will help ensure that the city is protected in case of a claim. And also importantly, if the applicant is a food vendor, we would be able to ensure that they had taken the appropriate steps to be approved by the San Mateo County Environmental Health Department. Which brings us into the county, who is actually responsible for the regulation and inspection of mobile food facilities. This includes both motorized and non-motorized vendors. Today, we're just talking about non-motorized ones. All vendors of food, including prepackaged food, would need to go through this process of ensuring compliance with county health. Got a quick look at their website here, where all the forms and resources can be found for applicants. And residents can also come on this site to look up the location and the health grades of the sidewalk vendors. That was something that the county officials were very helpful in explaining to us. It's also important to remember that this right now is a county prerogative, and we don't have the ability to waive any of these requirements. But at the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk about a new law that is maybe coming into place. It's passed the Senate and the Assembly, but that law would affect what I just said there. So here's a copy of the county's application for food vendors. In preparing for this item, as I mentioned, we also spoke with county mobile food inspection team, who helped us understand their process. And you can look on here, they do require a bit of information. There's also an inspection checklist that you can see that's included as part of the staff report. And you can see that they really do take safety and food handling safety, especially, very, very seriously, which is something that we appreciate. So while the county does do their best to assist vendors, they always make sure that these vendors use safe food preparation and handling equipment and perform annual inspections to ensure that this continues in the future. Vendors are also given a food grade sticker, which would need to be displayed on any food vending cart in the city under our proposed ordinance. I think it's important to note too, and we're going to mention this later, the county also does inspect the fuel sources on these carts to make sure that they are safe. And if they're using any sort of a flame, or if it's a hot dog cart and there's a heating element, they make sure to inspect all of those. So that's not actually something that the city needs to do necessarily. That's something that the county makes sure is safe before they're able to operate here. All right. So now we need to get into the proposed regulations themselves. And first and foremost is time. The proposed ordinance would permit vending in non-residential areas of the city between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., while in residential areas between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. The city's attorney's office worked with the planning staff to develop these times, and we believe that they do strike a fair balance of promoting that entrepreneurship that we're looking for and protecting the safety and welfare of the community. Moving on to place restrictions, the proposed ordinance would prohibit sidewalk vending in certain locations because of those public safety and welfare concerns. And importantly, it wouldn't allow stationary sidewalk vendors or those who don't move to operate within or near residential districts. Only roaming sidewalk vendors or those who continue on a path would be permitted to do so in the residential neighborhoods. There's also a full list of prohibited locations in the ordinance 6.25.060, which I'd encourage you to review in detail. I'm sure you already have. However, the list does include Burlingame Avenue between 200 feet west of El Camino Real and California Drive, Broadway between Balboa and Rollins Road, as well as any public property that does not meet the definition of a sidewalk or pathway, including an alley, street end, or parking lot, as well as within 200 feet of a police station, a fire station, a permitted certified farmers market during those hours, and any other area where there may be a special permit issued by the city for the time that that permit is in place. Again, there's quite a few more, and they are listed in the ordinance. The proposed ordinance would also limit sidewalk vending, not outright prohibit, but place restrictions on it in and around public parks, schools, public playgrounds, near intersections, and within 100 feet of another street vendor. So there won't be pooling of street vendors and some of the safety concerns that might come along with that. The full list, again, can be found in the ordinance. And as mentioned before, all sidewalk vendors would be required to operate in a very safe manner. Any heating and cooling elements would be inspected by the county and wouldn't be subject to review by the city's permitting process if we needed to. So those are the rules. And now very quickly, we're getting to the end. Sorry, we can talk a bit about how they'll be enforced. First and foremost, we know that this is going to be a new law and that oftentimes sidewalk vendors probably aren't going to be apprised of city rules and regulations or county ones. And some may even be afraid to come to the city or the county for fear of penalty. For that reason, our primary enforcement tool, especially at the beginning here, is going to be education. We're hopeful that our regulations will encourage the vendors to get permitted with the city and will ensure that they understand how this can be done before we step up to the additional enforcement actions. It's also important to remember that SB 940 decriminalized sidewalk vending. That means that there's no infractions, there's no misdemeanors, and there's no arrests. So what does that leave us with? That leaves us with fines. Fines would be our primary enforcement tool. And the fine structure is a bit complicated. You can read about it in SB 946 and in our ordinance itself. But there's some great things there to make sure that it does strike that balance between getting street vendors permitted safely and not stifling their activity. One of those is that the state mandated certain individuals who may be more disadvantaged, they're entitled to an ability to pay determination. So if they qualify, whatever fine is there would be reduced down to the 20% of the original amount if we find that the ability to pay determination requires us to do so. And finally, we'd also have the ability to revoke the permit if someone continues to violate the regulations. I do want to note, we've talked a lot about decriminalization. I want to make clear that this does not mean that we're legalizing other activities. If a street vendor violates other laws, not street vending laws, but other laws, for example, by selling stolen goods, by selling illegal narcotics, by assaulting a member of the public, city's police department still has the full tool belt of tools to take criminal enforcement action necessary to protect everyone. And finally, I wanted to quickly highlight another bill, SB 972, which could potentially affect this regulation in the future. It's already passed both the Senate and Assembly, which I mentioned. Further limits government restrictions on sidewalk vendors if it gets passed. This law is mostly aimed at restricting the regulation that the county health department has, and it would potentially allow some of the vendors to sell prepackaged or temperature regulated goods like ice cream or espresso. They would be able to forego some of the procedures that they currently have right now with the county health department under the law. So we'll continue to monitor the bill's passage, and we'll make sure to come back with revisions if they're necessary or warranted. And finally, I did want to note that the ordinance does have a few other updates to the municipal code. Those are mostly just cleanup sections to the Burlingame Municipal Code to make sure we don't have contradicting portions of it. It allows street vendors to, for example, have a sign that is exempt because, of course, they need a sign on their mobile card. But that's it. That was a lot, so I guess that's not it. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have. And once we've completed those, I'd encourage the mayor to follow the procedures for the official introduction of the ordinance on the staff report. But here to answer any questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant City Attorney. Colleagues, any questions of Mr. Spancel? I see Councilmember Colson.
Thank you. I have a question regarding noise. There is a lot of mandated, can't be here, can't be there, hot this, hot that, dangerous this, but there's nothing anywhere in here that talks about noise. So for example, if somebody chose to have a cart and then put amplified music on it and blare it in a neighborhood, I know they can only do it till 9 o'clock at night, but a lot of people have little children and kids and are trying to do homework and have dinners. So how does noise get encompassed in here?
You're muted.
Great. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that, Mayor. Thank you for that question, Councilmember Colson. We do have a section in there that talks about the permitted activities. It's in 6.25.050 P as in Paul. And it says that sidewalk vendors shall comply with all the noise standards provided in chapter 10.40. So it does refer to another section of our code, and it requires that no amplified music or loudspeakers are permitted. So for amplified music and loudspeakers, we do outright prohibit them. And then we refer back to other portions of our code that regulate noise for the other general noise regulations.
Okay, great. And then I also presume like little kids, like pulling a cart with like a lemonade stand and little things like that are obviously exempt from this.
I mean, it's selective enforcement. So yes,
Right,
we're not,
Perfect.
we're not looking to crack down on lemonade stands.
Not cracking down on the lemonade stands. Appreciate it. And then the last thing is I was reading about that some cities are enacting they're calling a clear and safe sidewalk ordinance that requires that people cannot block the ingress or egress to stores and buildings and businesses, cannot set up, tents, carts, etc. This is a little different, I know that, but can't prohibit block streets, ADA access. I don't think we really have that problem. I think there's a lot of cities that have massive problems with, blocking of sidewalks and things. But do they integrate it all, or is this kind of similar?
So we do have our ordinary sidewalk ordinance that does say that you can't block on the sidewalk. We actually had to amend that to say that in certain instances you can do that in this. However, we're saying here that you cannot have one of these 4-foot receptacles, because that's the maximum width, a 4-foot receptacle, in any sidewalk that's less than 8 feet. So we're making sure that there's always going to be a 4-foot wide passageway to maintain that ADA compliance and ensure that people can move down the streets. We've also done our best working with the planning department to ensure that the busiest areas in both pedestrian and vehicular traffic are areas where they're not able to street vend, because we do know that the safety and the welfare of the community requires that free passage, especially in the Burlingame Ave and Broadway business districts, and those streets especially are able to move quickly. So if you read through the prohibitions, I believe we've done a pretty good job of ensuring that that won't stop in any certain areas. But of course, we are more than happy to take a look at anything the council believes would be a better place to do so. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Do you have anything else, Ms. Colton? Councilmember Colson? No.
No.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was particularly struck by that comment and the remark in the staff report, Mr. Spansdale, that basically you have to be, this will only apply to places that have 8-foot sidewalks and wider, if I understood the staff report. And so quickly for refresher, Lorton, Primrose Park, what width are their sidewalks?
I'll have to see if I can phone a friend to our planning department. I did want to note though, because I think it is important, that the roaming sidewalk vendors are actually able to keep moving because they can allow for egress up and down the street. So we're talking mostly for these 8-foot sidewalks, these stationary, so people who are planted can get around.
So sorry, let me just dive on. So roving, does that include somebody who's got a hot dog stand like you see outside of the Giants Stadium? Is that roving or is that fixed?
Generally, I mean, it depends on every, I suppose, hot dog vendor that you see, but they would have to be continually moving and not staying put in one place for that to work. So,
okay. All right. So I think,
yeah, sorry.
But so my own guess is that's a little unusual, but anyway, I take the point. So if stationary, you'd have to have an 8-foot width. If Mr. Gardner or Mr. Mertuzza could remind me of how wide those sidewalks are.
Mr. Vice Mayor, on what street we have variable sidewalks, but are you referring to Burlingame Avenue?
No, not Burlingame Avenue, because it's excluded from that, but I'm curious about the side streets. So take Lorton,
So yeah, the Lorton is about roughly, it varies between 10 to 12 feet. And
really?
Yeah, some places it goes down, some portion is about 10 to 12, and then it goes down to, I believe, 7 or 8 feet. So there is a variable width, and similarly, the Park Road has lesser width. I believe it has like 7 feet wide.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Lorton is that wide, except maybe, and not to play small ball, but I think. Well, anyway, thank you for answering the question. I'll save any comments for later. Thank you, Mr. Mertuzza.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification question for Mr. Spansel. So any food-related vendors are really regulated by the county. That's not our job. And because there's a big difference between a hot dog and a steak sandwich vendor versus a banana stand versus a prepackaged ice cream rolly cart. So, but that all must be regulated. Every single one of those vendors has to go through the county.
That is correct, Councilmember Beach. However, they do treat them differently. When I was talking with the San Mateo County staff, it's not as though each person is getting the same inspection and application requirements. So the county does treat them differently. However, that's just not something that we regulate. So we would have to pass them to them to be able to get that permit before they can come to us. The new law, though, will be potentially changing that if it gets passed.
Thank you for including that briefing on the new law too. That was helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember O'Brien.
Right. And so just to confirm, they also then would have to get a business license, so through the city of Burlingame, correct?
As it's currently written in the proposed ordinance, yes, they would.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions, colleagues, before we move on? Councilmember O'Brien, you have something else? Oh, okay. I thought I saw the hand go up. Okay, so with that, then, Madam City Clerk, if you would please read the title of the proposed ordinance.
An ordinance of the city of Burlingame adding chapter 6.25 to the Burlingame Municipal Code, establishing a program to regulate and permit sidewalk vending, amending chapter 6.24 peddlers and solicitors, amending section 10.32.030 obstructing sidewalks by objects - exceptions, and amending section 25.42.020C exempt signs - signs integrated into certain devices. CEQA determination exempt pursuant to state CEQA guidelines sections 15.378 and 15.061B3.
Thank you for that. And colleagues, would anybody care to make a motion to waive the further reading
And introduce.
and introduce the ordinance?
Make a motion to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance.
Thank you, Councilmember Colson. And do we have a second? Come on, guys.
Yes, I'll second.
Very good. We have a motion by Councilmember Colson and a second by Councilmember Beach. If with that, if we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Colson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank
Mr. Mayor, may I make a quick comment for the public, which is introducing the ordinance does not necessarily reflect how any council member feels about it. This is just part of the process. So I just think it's useful to remind people that this allows us to then have comment on the underlying proposal.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. And with that, we will move on to our public hearing. So with that, I'll open it to the public. Madam City Clerk, you're in charge.
I have two emails. The first one comes from Doug. He says, I acknowledge that the high pedestrian and vehicular traffic in close proximity on Burlingame Ave and Broadway currently creates public safety concerns for sidewalk vending. That is why, in the next agenda item, I propose that the city council orient those streets toward walking and bicycling to prevent dangerous vehicle interactions in those important shopping areas. Permanently restricting street vendor access from Burlingame Ave and Broadway would be modern-day mercantile redlining that will effectively block low-income people and people of color from accessing low-cost entrepreneurship opportunities that can complement Burlingame's high-priced commercial real estate. Street vending activates and enlivens public spaces, and I would want to see it in Burlingame's commercial core without vehicular threats. I ask that the council modify the proposed ordinance to permit street commerce on Burlingame's two major commercial streets when private cars no longer pose a threat, and then diligently work to make it so. The second email I got is from Mr. Rabalos. He says, because of time constraints, I quickly scanned the proposed sidewalk vendor ordinance, which appears to ban sidewalk vending throughout Burlingame. Forgive me if I need clarification on the proposed legislation. I'm worried about this. Will someone explain where sidewalk vendors could be permitted? I don't believe legislation banning sidewalk vendors should be disguised as a permitting process. Will ice cream carts be forbidden from our parks? What about a coffee cart near Caltrade? I support small businesses, which is what licensed, regulated street vendors are. They are a community asset.
Thank you.
And then I don't see any hands raised. So you're good.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll bring it back to colleagues. We have some interesting comments there, so colleagues, what are your thoughts? Councilmember Beach.
No, I would just appreciate Mr. Spansel clarifying what the regulation states about street vending in parks and our public plazas.
Sure. Public plazas, we are going to be able to open up, and we can work later on to make sure those are allowed. The parks, we do allow roaming vendors to go through the parks. There is a distinction between active and passive parks in the current proposed ordinance. And in active parks where there are sporting events or that we do have a contract with a concessionaire, we wouldn't permit it to be around that. However, in passive parks where an ice cream vendor may be strolling down a path and moving and roaming through the park, that's still going to be something that we allowed. We also did work with the Parks and Rec director to make sure that she felt comfortable with this as well. And she does, knowing the certain vendors that may be occupying the parks right now. And she felt that that would not prohibit that activity too.
Got it. But a table of a jewelry salesperson set up for 4 hours in the park, is that considered, that's not considered roaming because they're not constantly moving, even though they could pick up and leave in an hour if they wanted to?
So roaming as it's defined right now, Councilmember Beach, is that you have to only stop to conduct a transaction. So we're thinking of that ice cream vendor who is making their way through a public park and then stops to sell the ice cream to a patron. But no, you would not be able to typically set up a jewelry stand at a active park especially. And each one will have a little bit of, because there is a plan that you have to put in place when you are doing the permitting process, so it can be looked at, but typically no, that would not be allowed in a public park.
And I would be maybe curious to hear what the Parks and Recreation Director and maybe what the staff concern was about allowing those kind of situations in a park. Thanks.
So part of the problem is just where they would go. And our pathways in a lot of our parks are not very wide, and we wouldn't want them set up for an extended period, say on the lawn, that could block other activities that go on in the park. The other thing that happens in the park is we have other activities that people rent the space for, whether it's a picnic or say a bark and brew. So the SPCA comes out and they do a fundraiser in the park. So then people come and vendors come pay part of that to be in that area. And then what they have is somebody coming in as competition. So then we end up in the middle between someone who has rented the space and is using it for a specific use for their function. And then we have other people out there basically honing in on what they're trying to do and taking away from their event. And the other one is when we have, say, BYBA, which is the boys baseball and girls softball, they have their own concession stands as fundraisers for their nonprofits. And so when you have competing vendors in there, it takes away from what they're trying to do. And they do pay a fee to cover the cost for the facilities they're using in those parks. And so any of the street vendors would not be paying any kind of fee to the city in compensation for it.
And Councilmember Beach, I did want to clarify in 6.25.060, it is permitted for stationary sidewalk vendors to sell food or merchandise on a sidewalk that is a minimum of 8 feet wide. So it still is allowed. It's just those don't exist too much in Burlingame. So it's kind of a restriction based on the ADA compliance aspect and the passing of pedestrian traffic, but it is allowed if there is a park that has an 8-foot wide pathway.
Councilmember Beach, anything else? Or...
No, I'm just reflecting on all that. Thanks.
Okay.
I'll have some comments afterwards after I hear from
Very
my
good.
colleagues.
Councilmember Colson, I think, had her hand up.
Just a quick clarification for Mr. Ravelos. I just want to make sure that Assistant City Attorney Spansell that we address his comments, which apparently his reading of the ordinance, the interpretation was that we are banning this, but we are not. We're actually clarifying and allowing it, correct?
That is correct. We were placing health and safety restrictions on where it can be done to make sure that it doesn't affect community public health and safety, but there will be many, many places that street vendors are able to now legally operate within the city limits.
Right, legally and safely for them too. I mean, we don't want somebody, with a pot of boiling water cooking hot dogs or something, and a ball hits them and it splashes all over them and burns people. So thank you for making sure that health and safety are both paramount in this ordinance.
Very good. Thank you for that comment. Councilmember O'Brien, I think, was next.
Yeah, so my question is there any time a cap on the amount in like a certain area? Is there something that prevents from multiple, let's say, stationary vendors lining up on one particular street?
Yes, so right now it says that they have to be around 100 feet away from each other. So the street vending wouldn't be right next to each other. They'd have to have
So
space.
it's as long as there's 100 feet. So you can have from one corner to another corner, every 100 feet is stationary. Is that what you're saying?
Assuming that they
Okay.
meet all the other requirements, there's intersection requirements and width requirements, but yes,
Yes.
On the right street, they could be 100 feet apart.
Very good. Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to withhold my question for now.
Very good. Okay, so then with that, then we will so I guess our next step is to determine whether we're going to move forward with the ordinance, and we would make a motion to move forward. So colleagues, unless we have any final comments or any further questions, I will entertain a motion to bring the ordinance back.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, could I actually ask one quick question before we do that? So if you're sidewalk L and it's an 8-foot sidewalk, where do we think the vendor's going to stand? Next to those? Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, Mr. Spansel, were you able to hear his question?
I think I heard part of it, Mr. Mayor. Where would the street vendor stand? That they would. It depends on the receptacle that they had, but they'd be either able to stand in the receptacle or right next to the receptacle, as long as they're not in any way encroaching upon the 4 feet of width that's required to make sure that it's passable in the area.
Mr. Vice Mayor, was that what you were looking for? You might be having trouble connecting. I don't know if you're talking, Mr. Vice Mayor, but you're muted right now. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to my colleagues and looking for a motion to bring back the ordinance.
I'll make a motion to bring back the ordinance.
And do I have a second? Councilmember Beach, did you have any other comments?
Yeah, I guess I do have a comment. I'm just trying to process all this. I mean, one thing that occurs to me, and it's good, I guess we have some structure. I don't see this as a problem that such a problem that we have to address in Burlingame. And I hope that we're not making things too onerous for folks that are, trying to do some of this activity that really isn't a big imposition to the community. I would hope that in our outreach that we can get creative about how we can have information that's easily accessible about how to comply, like how to get the business license, how to get this permit that's in multiple languages. I think we have to recognize that a lot of folks that might be doing this kind of street vending are going to not have English as their native tongue. They may be unbanked. So how can we streamline payment? How can we make this, not threatening, very accessible? And certainly Assistant City Attorney Spansel said it's going to be an education process, but just that it's not so onerous, to allow this to happen. In my mind, it would be great if we could set some, we do have public spaces in our parks where we don't necessarily rent the space. That's sort of public domain that people can stand on and have a meeting or something. And if we could set aside some of that space where maybe some of these vendors could set up for a couple of hours if that's a need that we see moving forward. That would seem like a reasonable solution rather than just prohibiting or only allowing mobile vendors in our parks. I could see a jewelry stand or something setting up, or a little snack area. So I think it'll be, we've got to have something on the books. It sounds like it's the right thing to do for a whole host of reasons, but I certainly hope we can do the outreach and the education and be sensitive to making this as easy as possible to apply and pay for permits electronically from, say, a smartphone. Just make it really simple and easy in multiple languages. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. And I think you may bring up a good point. We're not here having this discussion because we're overrun by street vendors. It's more, we just have to comply with state law. Mr. Spencer, is that correct?
That's correct. Currently, right now, as the law is written, we are not complying with the law as the state has written it.
And I say that because I think you make a good point, Councilmember Beach. It's not that we're looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. We're just required to do this. I do think it's important that we have it because it could become an issue moving forward. But I don't think it is one right now. So I'm basically in favor of moving forward. But I think that was a good point. Mr. Vice Mayor, you want to try your point again?
Yeah, sorry, I had a trouble with the internet there. Just very quickly. So, one, I believe this is a solution in search of a problem, and I get a little frustrated. But I do think Mr. Rebelos's point and Councilwoman Beach's point about, we can't, on the one hand, say we're allowing stuff and then make it so difficult regulatorily that they can't achieve it. So I think we all want to strike that balance. The two issues that concern me practically is where vendors are going to set up. If they're going to set up next to, so you have sidewalks that are mostly 7 to 8 feet. These, the places take 3 to 4 feet. So they're either going to be on the parking side, and then they're going to be blocking cars and people trying to get to their cars, or they're going to be bumped up against the window of the merchant who spent a lot of money renting their store and putting their wares in the window that now you can't see. And so that's one issue that I think is going to be problematic. And the other is if you're a food vendor and your patrons slop on the sidewalks, who's responsible for cleaning that up? Is it, I can tell you that the restaurateur who's nearby, who's paying a cleaning fee, is going to be upset if he gets billed for it. So I don't think, this isn't my favorite ordinance that we've ever considered. But I also understand that we don't have a choice. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Thank you. Any other comments, final comments from colleagues? Otherwise, I do have a motion on the table from Councilmember Colson, and I would love to get a second.
Just may I just ask a quick call? So, Mr. Spansale, what's the typical sort of like feedback loop on this? So like in a year, will we have a report that will say like this many people registered, or just, it could be consent, but do colleagues have a sense, or when they want to get something back, like how many people applied? Did we have any instances of enforcement or citing, that kind of thing?
I would personally say that if it becomes a problem, we can reconsider it, but I'm going to pass it on to Councilmember O'Brien, see what her thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that was actually, I was thinking that too. I really would. I'm not overly enthusiastic about this just because I worry about our existing merchants that are paying, high rents to run their businesses. But I do understand to an extent, why we're doing it. It's a mandate, but I also think it's nice to have, other opportunities for people. So I would like to have the chance, to reevaluate, and I think a yearly evaluation would be hopefully fair. That at least gives us enough time to gather data, and it may go very smoothly. It's not a problem now, so I'm just thinking kind of futuristically. There could be some unintended consequences that we're not really thinking about right now. So if we could have a report on a yearly basis, I would really appreciate that.
Very good. So, okay, so now we have a motion on the table, and I still am looking for a second. Okay, you know what? I'll second it myself. So we have a motion by Councilmember Coulson, and a second by Mayor Ortiz. And with that, we can have roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien,
I'll go with a yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Reluctantly, yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
So can I ask, does the motion include the notion that we're going to return this to council for a review of how it's working?
I am certainly happy to include that in my motion.
Would the second agree?
Yes, the second agrees, but now we have to make sure that those who already voted need to vote again on the amended motion.
Well, and if I may, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, I mean, we are going to be bringing this back for the second reading. So any motion to do that should be then.
Right, Mr. Spanso, you're absolutely right. We could always include it at that point or discuss that. So with that, I will agree. I will agree. But I think it's going to be very important to have a check back and make sure. Thank you.
Okay, so just to be clear, and I'm confused.
We're staying with the original motion.
We're staying with the original motion. So yes, I am an aye on the original motion, and we will bring back the ordinance. Okay, we're good. We can move on. Thank you all. Yeah, that's a tricky one, but I think we're doing the right thing. And again, we can tweak it as we go along. So thank you all. We move on to item number 10A, which is a discussion on an extension of the pilot the parklet program on a transition to a long-term parklet program. Let's see, who is taking this one? Is it Mr. Gardner?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ortiz and members of the council. And I do want to acknowledge this is really a all hands on deck collaboration between all the different departments. But I'm happy to kind of make the presentation. This is a discussion of an extension of the pilot program for parklets and or possibly transition to a long-term parklet program. Just to give an overview context, the parklet program was originally initiated as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but over time the parklets have become more of an economic development tool and or an amenity, and people really enjoy the expanded opportunities for sidewalk dining. Along those lines, last year, the City Council approved extending the parklet program through December 31st of this year, with the provision that rent be charged for the use of publicly owned space and that the sidewalk cleanings fees be assessed. The rent has been set at $1,500 per year, which was based on an analysis of downtown commercial rents with a proration or reduction based on the fact that parklets are open air and are unconditioned space rather than fully conditioned storefronts. The cleaning fees were set at $250 per month for parklet owners based on an analysis of cost to the city in the form of additional staff time needed to clean around the parklets. The program is currently slated to sunset at the end of this year, and staff is seeking guidance on whether the pilot program should be extended, and if so, whether to move towards a more long-term program. There's 34 parklets in the Broadway and downtown districts, totaling 74 displaced parking spaces. Should the City Council wish to extend the parklet program on a long-term basis, the staff report lists a number of recommended modifications to the program. First is enforcement of safety concerns based on program guidelines. These concerns include obstacles to the pedestrian pathway, particularly around ADA accessibility and clear paths of travel. Also, a new restriction on parklets within 25 feet of a controlled intersection to address visibility concerns. Access points to trash capture devices and storm inlets, and requirements to perform proactive preventive maintenance and repairs. And that would be to the structures as they age and get a little older. This would be independent of the staff cleaning measures of the sidewalks and the streets around them. We did do a community survey, so allow me to take a moment to go through just a few slides to give the highlights of the survey. The survey had a number of questions, mainly to gauge who was answering it. And the core question of the survey was whether to extend the pilot program to go with a longer term program or not. So we got 507 responses, which is really good. Of those, 16 were from restaurants with parklets. 4 were from restaurants that do not have parklets. 57 were from businesses that are neither restaurants or retail. They're just some sort of other type of business here in Burlingame. 32 were from retailers and 397 were from residents. So our residents definitely hopped onto this survey. So the core question was, would you like the parklet program to be extended / become more permanent? And the restaurants with the parklets, perhaps not surprisingly, overwhelmingly 94% would like either an extension or a more permanent program. I do want to back up for a second. We're using the word permanent here in the survey because that's kind of understandable to the public, but we also want to distinguish that we're technically using the term long-term. Permanent has associations with well, a permanent conveyance of property, and that's not what's on offer here, but a longer term where it's got a longer timeline than what we've been looking at is what we're talking about. Of the restaurants with no parklet, 25%, I do want to mention there were only 4 respondents, and those respondents are important, but also whenever you have a small sample like that, you just want to be aware of that's 1 person. General non-residential business, non-restaurant businesses are also more or less in favor at 77%. Retailers less so, 35%, and residents quite overwhelmingly at 85%. What this question also did was it had a little nuance where it was divided into either extension of the current pilot program or a longer term program. So in terms of just extending the program, 31% of the restaurants with parklets were in favor of extension. The restaurants with no parklets, nobody was in favor of an extension. General non-residents, restaurant businesses, 32%, retailers, 29%, and residents, 24%. Moving to, and this is extending the current pilot program. We asked them about becoming more permanent. The restaurants are interested in something more permanent at 63%, those with the parklets. Those without the parklets, there was one individual who did think that a longer term program would be good. The general non-restaurant businesses, about split 46%. Retailers not in favor at all, only 6%, and residents were at 61%. So to kind of take all of this together, because we are asking 2 questions. One is, should we extend the current pilot program or should we look at something longer term? The restaurants with parklets are more leaning and inclined to a more permanent program. The restaurants with no parklets were kind of split with most of them just wanting to end the program, but one being interested in 25% or one person being interested in the more permanent program. Non-restaurant businesses were kind of split across the board with most wanting something more permanent, but fair numbers for either extending the current program or ending. Retail businesses have, some are supportive of extending the current program in terms of a pilot program, not a lot of support for the long term, and quite a few would support ending the program. And then of the residents, they lean towards a more permanent program, but there are a fair number who either want to just look at the pilot program or end the program altogether. So with that, just a few more remarks. We also asked the Economic Development Subcommittee last week on the possible extension of the pilot program, and they recommended an 18-month extension of the program. So that would take us into the summer of 2024. They also recommended a review of the rent and fee structure to ensure that rents reflect current market rates, and also that the cleaning and maintenance are adequate to keep the sidewalks clean of food and beverage debris. And should the subcommittee members want to comment on that, it is my Vice Mayor Brownrigg and Councilmember Colson. So finally, we're just asking, staff is asking for direction on whether the pilot parklet program should be further extended, and or whether to move towards a more long-term program. With that, I am available for questions, and as mentioned, we have colleagues as well who can speak from their respective disciplines.
Mr. Gardner, I'm just happy that you stumbled on the parklet pilot program, or the other way around. So
yeah, that's a time.
Misery loves company, so thank you. With that, so colleagues, let's ask questions, then we'll open it to the public and then have comment afterwards. So I do have a question for the members of the committee regarding the, let me ask a question first. Mr. Gardner, do you have a sense of how many parklets were abandoned or eliminated when we imposed the fee?
I see Lisa is.
I believe it was 8, and I can look back at my emails. I sent that information out to all of you a while back. So why don't you move on and I'll go try to track down that information again.
Okay, I think I remember that number, and I think my whole point that I'm trying to make is it wasn't an overwhelming number. I think that the majority of the parklets remained, even though we imposed the fees that seemed a little controversial at the time. So for the members of the subcommittee, I'm curious, the 18-month time frame that you guys are proposing, is that just to get people through all of next year?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councilmember Colson.
Sure. So yeah, I'll just look at my notes here. Yes, what we were thinking is that we did not want to disband these programs in the middle of winter when it might be very difficult to, remove. People might be really wanting to eat outside. And we felt it was better to get through this winter in a year and then make a decision in June at the beginning of summer, so that if we were to move to more sidewalk dining or some options with regard to having the streets open, it would be coming on to summer, and then it would also tie in with our fiscal year a little better.
And so did you guys consider the option of just having an ongoing program that we could cancel at any time?
How do you describe that? An ongoing
versus coming up with a time frame of 18 months, we could just say it's an ongoing program until further notice, until we decide it's not a good thing.
We got pretty big, I think we got feedback, and Vice Mayor, I'll let you handle this, but we got some pretty significant feedback from the non-restaurant businesses that if we basically turn this into a permanent program, they would be very unhappy.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Vice Mayor. Do you have more thoughts on that?
No, I don't. I think Councilmember Colson summed it up well. We were trying to get off the winter cycle, and doing it next summer would only be 6 months. That's not very much time. So that's kind of how we came to summer of 24. And, a thought experiment is, well, what if we let every merchant spill into the parking? Like, there's a point at which we thought we should have a really citywide conversation about whether these should be permanent. But we thought 18 more months with COVID, hopefully more in the rear mirror, we'd all be able to come to that conversation and say, yes, they should be permanent. Heck, maybe one of these streets should be shut. There can be a larger, wider conversation about how we want our streets to evolve, rather than making that decision right now when we're still getting waves of COVID and right in the winter time. So that was kind of the thinking on 18 months, but not permanent.
Right. And I really do appreciate all the hard work that you guys have done on this. And I miss being on that committee. That was always fun. So with that, bring it back to our city manager. I think you have an answer for us.
I do. So we had 12 parklets that went away, but one of those was a shared parklet with another entity. So we were really down 11, and then we added 2. So the net was down 9. That was as of the beginning of May.
Very good. And the reason I asked that question is I think that one of the things we were trying to achieve with the fees was to find that balance, and I think that we have. So with that, Councilmember O'Brien.
So my question is, I noticed in the staff report that 10 out of 31 parklet owners have not paid for the cleaning fees in the month of April, May, and June.
Oh.
So, which I find quite concerning. And so can we revoke their usage of their parklet? Can that be considered until they pay the bills? Because I am concerned about these, our sidewalks being dirty.
So I'll go ahead and jump in, and Michael, city attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not complying with the rules that we've set for them, so we can revoke it. We have sent out a reminder, and our next step is to send them to collections. So I would hope that we would, see that process through, just to see if somehow the bill got lost and they just didn't think about it. But the list includes some parklets that are quite successful. So I would imagine that as soon as they get that reminder from the email from the city that they will be paying that, they will be getting their next bill pretty soon in early October. Michael, do you have anything to add about that?
Correct. So the city manager is correct, is that the ultimate, one of the ultimate hammers that the city can come down with is revocation of the permit for failure to live up to the conditions of the permit. We would, that would be probably one of the last steps that we would take if the notification and education process fails.
Great.
So are they billed quarterly?
They are billed quarterly. So the first bills were for that 3-month period. They were billed $750 sometime around June 30th or beginning of July. And the next bill will be for July, August, September. So that will go out, early October.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, that's funny, because I thought the same thing you were probably thinking, is like they've been billed monthly and they've refused to pay, but no.
Well, yeah, when I first saw the list, I was wondering why they all owed the same amount, and I thought that was weird. And then I checked with our finance director, and they are billed quarterly.
Yeah, okay, that explains it, because when I read this initially, I thought it was monthly, but then I did, like you said, to our city manager, I thought it was odd that it was all 3 months. There was multiple businesses. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't perceive this to be a problem, but I'm curious if staff or colleagues on the Economic Development Subcommittee are getting any complaints about parklets that are, in existence, but they're not actively used. I know that we set some parameters about like how many days per week these things actually have customers in them and are vibrant, not just open for business, but really being used. Or is that not an issue with some of the folks who are business owners who are against them? So are the parklets that are existing, do we perceive them to be actively used and regularly used? And then are we monitoring that? How are we monitoring that, if at all? Or is it complaint based? Thanks.
Lisa, should I go ahead, or are you going to answer that? Great. So that's a very good question. We have some parklets that are not used as previously conditioned, and staff is working with them to get them used or have them removed. So that's an active conversation going on, and also there will be, but in terms of complaints, we have not received complaints from the businesses or folks, but staff is observing and making an effort to get them to either use it or remove them.
Thank you for that insight.
Thank you. Councilmember Colson.
So I just had a quick question about sort of like design and paint and dead plant kind of standards. Sort of what's our plan or thought around that. I know the grand jury has sent us a letter, and I think I saw that in our crystal ball at a future agenda, but that seemed to be a recurring theme and comment amongst the naysayers. Is one of the reasons they didn't like them was they felt they were, some of them were not held to the same high aesthetic standards as others, and maybe even cleanliness.
So it's also my response, I guess. One of the conditions that is before you is to keep up the parklets, the aesthetics of the parklets. We don't go into defining the details of the aesthetics, as the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but we do want to make sure that they are currently kept up as they have, and not only just the aesthetics, but also structurally speaking, the paint and all that, so that should the council were to extend the program, we want to make sure that the folks they understand the conditions that they need to keep up the parklet, especially the safety aspect of the parklet, the seismic and the building structure, because they do need repairs from time to time.
Thank you, Mr. Martuza.
Great.
Councilmember Colson.
Nope, that's it. I'm looking over my set of notes. The only other thing I have is if for some reason this goes to a permanent situation, we need to think about putting in like escalators into our costs and things like that, so we don't end up going long time and then having to come and give people big giant jump and they all get upset. I would just say, like, it's going to go up CPI every year, so it covers our employees' costs and it covers a normal increase that would probably be in their own real lease.
Perfect. Finance director, you're gonna have to send some bills with a bunch of cents on them. So with that,
rounding's fine.
yeah, up to the nearest 100. Councilmember O'Brien.
Yeah, so I don't know what direction we're going to go on this, but I do think, the longer time we give the parklets, I think it may be worth discussing the benefit of allowing maybe 3 or 4 certain designs, and they follow those designs rather than a lot of the kind of hodgepodge. I mean, we have some that look they look really good, and then the others, it looks like it's kind of been thrown together. I know when I was reading the survey results, and I will say I enjoyed reading all these reviews. I'm glad we had a good feedback from our community. I think over 500 responses, and I think some of the comments were actually very good ones, and so that was one of the ones I did read, and I think that could be beneficial for us to look at futuristically. So I'm just kind of throwing that out. Secondly, a question for Syed. Can you review the cleaning schedule, please, for the Burlingame Avenue, Broadway, and then the side streets?
The cleaning, as I understand, this I have not had the chance to speak with my staff, but lately, as of last month, my understanding is that we do clean 7 days a week, Burlingame Avenue. We do early in the morning hours, and primarily the focus is on Burlingame Avenue and Broadway as well. On the side streets, the schedule is not as every day. It is a lesser number of hours, but in front of the parklets, we do go clean, and we do go inspect it, and if it requires cleaning, we do cleaning on a case-by-case basis. Typically, at a minimal, the side streets get swept on a weekly basis at a very minimum. But then staff goes by inspection, and especially in the areas of parklets. And if that require cleaning, staff does the cleaning on those sidewalks.
Okay. So I think there may need to be further discussion on the cleaning, because I have seen the little cleaner out early, it's usually in the earlier hours in the morning, which is great. But sometimes by midday, the sidewalks look like they've been destroyed. So I just kind of wonder, is there a way to, I know it costs more money to do the cleaning more frequently, or having the merchants kind of increase their awareness and have their staff, spot clean throughout the day. Because there are certain areas where there's just a lot more deposits, whether it's food, ice cream. I worry also about slip and falls with some of the substances I've seen when I've walked down Burlingame Avenue, and I walk down frequently. So that is a big concern for me is the cleaning process, which I think we may need further consideration, especially if we extend the time for the parklets. I do agree. I think the economic development team and looking at potential, time frame, because it gives us time to maybe have a bigger conversation. As I think Vice Mayor Brownrigg mentioned, do we look at, closing the street for certain time periods? Or do we look at making a one-way Burlingame Avenue rather than a two-way Burlingame Avenue and move the parklets actually out into the street? So then the sidewalks are clear. I am concerned about the sidewalks, especially in certain areas in Burlingame Avenue where it is very hard to pass people. It is just, I think, has gotten too crowded. And it's very hard to pass through. People aren't really paying attention, and so they're blocking the sidewalks. So there are definitely some concerns that I do have. I do like the parklets, but I do think at least giving us extra time, whether it's 18 months, 24 months, to have a bigger community conversation on how we can improve these areas that we do have the parklets, and look at how we can possibly restructure Burlingame Avenue futuristically. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question, Councilmember Colson. I'm going to take a moment. I believe it was the city attorney who brought this up to me. Was there a question about access to utilities underneath the parklets? And would that be something that we need to address for a short-term extension, or do we leave that for a more permanent program?
Mr. Mayor, I will take that question. Yes, we do need access to utilities. Those requirements are currently present in the conditions that have been approved by council before, and they are required, and the parklet applicants are aware of them. So we do need to allow both PG&E and city utilities to be accessed as needed for maintenance as well as for emergencies, and the folks are aware of that.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Colson, you have another question?
Thank you. Yes, two. The first is with regard to chairs and tables that seem to be hodgepodgely stacked and all that. Is there any way to require people to put those chairs and tables back in their restaurants and shut the doors? Because it is kind of a eyesore when you're walking down the street at noon or and people have their tables just stacked up because they only do dinner and they're kind of looking all around. So that's kind of one question. And the second one is with regard to Councilwoman O'Brien's concerns in terms of cleanliness. It's really interesting. A lot of people did comment in that thing that they love to bring their dogs to the parklets and their dogs in the parklets all the time. And I have seen dogs urinate and defecate in the parklets, which we would not allow in a restaurant. I mean, it would never stand. You can't bring dogs in a restaurant. So do we need to think about, I know people love to bring their dogs to the parklets, but I'm worried about the sort of, is there any county code or direction? Is it allowed, or should that be thought about?
I'm not aware of the county code, but we do have signs posted on Burlingame Avenue with the bag, for the, to pick up after the dogs. And we did initially when we opened up the Burlingame Avenue after the construction, we had a lot of educational campaign, but there are a lot of signage that are placed out there, and staff does respond for calls during the day, throughout the day actually, when there's dog poop and for cleaning it up. But I don't know if there is any sort of law at the county level, definitely not at the city level. I'm aware of.
Thank you. You know what, can I ask, I'm going to follow up on something that Councilmember O'Brien said about some of the restaurants on Burlingame Avenue and they're encroaching on the right of way. Have we seen, I mean, because the permit tells them where they should have the tables, and I think in many cases, and I can think exactly where that spot is that she's mentioning. Have there been any violations of those encroachment permits?
We did have an issue earlier this year with the help of City Attorney's Office. We went to each of the restaurants that are found to be in violation. We gave them notices to put their tables and chairs back. I'm speaking particularly about the sidewalks only, and they were brought into compliance. But again, it's a matter of once you go away, come back to the office, they may place those tables and chairs back into the area where they're not supposed to be. And we don't really have staffing to be able to go back and inspect it, and so this is an ongoing issue of compliance, monitoring and tracking. And so staff is reacting as opposed to being proactive because of the level of staffing we have dedicated for this purpose. But that's certainly one of the issues we are going to have to focus as part of this program.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Martusa. Colleagues, I'm ready to go to public comment. If nobody else has any other questions, then we'll have our comments at the end. You guys good? Okay, with that, then, Madam City Clerk, if you could take the lead.
I received 2 emails, so we'll start with those. One's from John Karanian. He says, as a business owner on Broadway, I would like to endorse my support for the Broadway parklets for permanent or extended program. We have a total of 3 parklets, 2 parklets on Broadway, which takes up 5 parking spots, and 1 parklet on Cappuccino, which takes up 2 parking spots. The parklets on Broadway do not impact our parking situation in our business district. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. And the other one comes from Doug, and he says, I am part of the more than 70% of parklet survey respondents who support at least extending the program. As the vast majority of survey comments have already said, the parklets are an asset to the city and allow Burlingame businesses to keep up with the desire for outdoor eating. It would do a disservice to Burlingame residents, businesses, and visitors to pull this city back from such a successful and already beloved program. Furthermore, I urge the council to fully commit to the outdoor dining and shopping experience on Burlingame Ave and Broadway, and to devote our 2 downtowns into timeless, pedestrian-oriented shopping streets to make our community more livable. The data is unequivocal. Study after study has found that replacing on-street parking with walking and bicycling space has little to no impact on local businesses, and in some cases might even increase business. While walkers and cyclists tend to spend less per shopping trip than drivers, they also tend to make more trips, pumping more total money into the local economy over time. By prioritizing the many residents and visitors to our major shopping districts, Burlingame can make room to add space for art installations, space for additional urban greenery, and space for street performers to add life and vitality to our town. I encourage the city to reclaim the less than 2/3 of miles of public right-of-way on these 2 streets and use it to allow commerce and community to flourish, with people shopping safely and slowly in front of these businesses, creating premier travel destination just steps from multiple public transportation options and existing and in progress parking lots and garages. We deserve it. And then I see 1 hand raised. Peter Stevenson. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Megan. Thank you. I don't know if it's appropriate. I don't really have comments. I have more questions, so I'll stop there before I raise them.
No, you can ask your question.
Okay. Did the study look into the economic development impact of the parklets on the businesses that actually use them? In other words, are they getting additional revenues even though they were invoked during a time of COVID to help them? Are there now upsides that they're enjoying because of the parklets? And I would suspect that the survey results support that, given the vast majority of those with parklets that are particularly in the restaurant business supportive of them? Second question is, was there any information from the restaurants who did not choose to have a parklet or maybe were not accessible to a parklet and their viewpoint? And then finally, what is the parklet impact on the retail, the non-restaurant business usage? And I'm just wondering about the correlation of all that data to decisions that the council is making on extending or making more permanent the parklets.
Thank you. And then that is it. We don't have any other hands raised.
Okay, who wants to take Mr. Stevenson's questions and see if we can?
If you'd like, Mr. Mayor, I can take a quick hack at that on behalf of the economic subcommittee. So we've been very mindful, as Mr. Stevenson suggests, the program was set up at first to allow businesses just to survive because people weren't going indoors. Subsequently, the council raised fees in part so that restaurants, because this is a use of public space, this is public land, it's not privately held, and we wanted to make sure as a council that if people were going to impose on public land, that they were actually using it. So we set a fee high enough to make sure that people would make a conscious decision about whether it would benefit their business and whether they could make good use of it. And as a result, most of the restaurants kept them. And I think that is a partial answer to his first question. Have they been good for restaurants? And the answer is almost certainly yes, because they continue to roll them over even at a higher fee structure. We don't, as we know, we don't ask for revenue reports from restaurants, so we can't say firsthand, but I think there's a lot of anecdotal data. In terms of the merchants next door, we care a lot about that and always have. That's why the survey, it was important to us to get a good survey response from merchants, and I think that data was reported pretty well, and it remains, an ambivalence. In our subcommittee hearing, Mr. Salma, a property owner, as we all know, of many properties, pointed out that the vibrancy of outdoor dining redounds to the benefit of other merchants nearby. And I think merchants and other council members free to comment, but I think they feel, yes, sometimes, no, sometimes, and there's sort of a mixed bag of reactions, but I don't think anyone feels actually hurt by it. And that was important to us in the subcommittee in terms of proposing an 18-month extension and not a shorter one, or not canceling it. And I think, to Mr. Stevenson's larger point, we do try to balance all of that. We are not a big city with a big data gathering machine, so we don't have lots and lots of data, but we do, I think, try our best to both talk to individuals and use common sense to determine where that trade-off, where that balance of benefits is. And I'll defer over to Councilwoman Colson if she'd like to add to that.
No, I think you've got that all. Just about right. This is a tricky question, and it balances a ton of competing interests and a lot of innovative potential ideas, from closing streets down or temporarily or whatever. And I agree with, again, Councilwoman O'Brien's comments that we just need a little more time to watch it play out and think about it and get more data on the businesses. I particularly appreciated data around, like, when the parklet was in front of my place, my business was down 40%, the parklet went away, my business is back up 60%. So sort of data with the other retailers, and we just don't have it now to make decisions.
Thank you, Councilmember Colson. And with that, then we will close the public hearing, and we will bring it back to colleagues for direction to staff. Let me just give my 2 cents first. I think I find the 18-month a very reasonable suggestion. I definitely endorse that. I think that when we imposed the fees, I was concerned because of the outcry that maybe we had gone a little bit too far. I am now convinced, and I think that the answer was, with how many parklets went away, is that we hit it probably just right. the idea being that we didn't want any parklets not being used and taking up, parking spaces that would otherwise be used. And I think we got it just right. I think that the public sentiment is very, very much in favor of continuing the parklet program. I think that people in town just enjoy eating outdoors and they enjoy the program. I think that so for every reason, I think we need to move forward. Now we need to make sure that that we deal with the aesthetics, because I think that Councilmember O'Brien brought up some good points as far as the way some of them looked. It need to be kind of cleaned up a bit. But I am definitely in favor of moving forward. I like to put together a new program. So with that, colleagues, I'll pass it on to whoever wants to comment next. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you summed it up really, really well. And I appreciate the effort that went into the survey and all the people who responded, because I thought, like Councilmember O'Brien mentioned, it was very helpful to read those detailed responses. And I do think that the extending through the spring of 2024 makes really good sense. I think that's a reasonable, on balance, all things considered, that's a reasonable way to go forward. I do feel pretty strongly about the Economic Development Subcommittee's recommendation to make sure we have an appropriate cost escalator, like Councilmember Coulson mentioned. We can't be giving away, subsidizing private businesses. This is, certainly we started this when it was an emergency, but this is very valuable space to have extended places to conduct business, and we can't have it cost us money. Moreover, if we do need to do more cleaning, as Councilmember O'Brien suggested, or let's say we just need to have more staff do more cleaning more frequently, that should be passed along as well, just to keep up the appearance. I don't think we should hesitate to do what needs to be done to make it a successful program. Personally, I like that there's less cars downtown. Personally, I think it's very vibrant. And I also think I'm really excited to hear colleagues talk about an openness to talk about, maybe even next summer, we can have a springtime discussion about pilot programs of trying to close certain streets now that we're out of the first 2 years of the pandemic where we were so worried about social distancing outside. We don't have that fear, at least right now. So maybe we can do some experiments. And I do think continuing the parklet program while we do some pilot programs about possible different street closures downtown in the summer and experimenting with those pedestrian thoroughfares are going to be easier to do with the parklets rather than pulling them all back and going back to having all the original parking there. So thank you for considering. I support the recommendation to extend it.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson.
Councilwoman Beach just gave me an interesting idea, and maybe it's really dumb, and she and Vice Mayor Brownwig will kibosh it right now, but when we're doing the El Camino Real work, and starting that, at the time that there's a lot of construction going on right by downtown Burlingame Avenue, that might give us a really good excuse to shut the avenue for a little bit temporarily while we work on that, and encourage the use of the outside streets. And maybe that's, my cat is crying, I'm sorry, stop please. But just thinking about the work on El Camino Real, and some of the side street work that we're doing, and the post office, and when that's going to come into play, and just some of the dynamics, Director Matusa and Director Gardner, as the sort of shifting construction requirements and things are going on, it might be a thoughtful way to think about temporary closures.
So street closures would be a lovely future agenda item. So maybe we can propose that. So with that, Councilmember O'Brien.
Yes, so I agree with basically everything everyone has mentioned this evening. If we do consider doing pilot studies of closing, certain blocks of Burlingame Avenue, or the whole Burlingame Avenue, or one way, or whatever it may be, I do get concerned about coming from the age-friendly perspective of older adults having to walk longer distances. And so I know in Ireland, in doing some of my research, they actually have a thing called age-friendly parking. And it's a certain amount of parking spaces that they actually put in their commercial areas that are for older adults, and it's bigger font. On the street, it actually says in the parking space, age friendly. They put certain material on it, so it's, they don't skid like with their walkers or whatever it may be. So if we're thinking of closing streets futuristically, I think that might be something we want to look into and discuss about it at a future date.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other final comments? I think staff, I hope you have enough direction here. Do you have any thoughts, Mr. Gardner and Mr. Martusa? Any thoughts on anything that you would want us to address before we move on?
Thank you. No, I think this has been a good direction, and I think the rationale for extending the pilot program is a good one. The grand jury report will come back to the council next month, and this will be helpful for us to integrate this direction into the response to that report. And essentially it allows the city to look at the parklet program in a larger context and really see how it could fit into some bigger urban design goals. So thank you. This has been very helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Martusa, and Ms. Goldman. We really appreciate all of your efforts on this. I think that the survey was wonderful and it made our job a lot easier. So thank you for that. And to the members of the Economic Development Subcommittee, thank you for your hard work on this. I miss being on that committee because I did enjoy these kind of items. So with that, we will move on to item number, 10B, which is a discussion of public art in public places. And I see Ms. Margaret Golomstead, our Director of Public Works, appeared miraculously. So please take it away.
Good evening, Mayor Ortiz and council members. So I am here tonight with my colleagues, City Librarian Brad McCulley and Community Development Director Kevin Gardner. So they'll be able to answer some questions that might come up in their areas. So we're talking about public art in public places and the idea of a city arts liaison committee to help us vet future possible public art in the city. So we do have an existing art policy right now. It was developed quite a while ago in 2007. And if you hear a noise behind me, it's my kitten who's just decided to run all around my furniture. And hopefully she won't jump on me. The policy is attached as part of the staff report. But since that policy was established, we have accepted public art in different areas. So the library has accepted art over the years. Community development through the Planning Commission has vetted public art as development projects came through the city. And more recently, we delved into public art that the city through donations paid for, and that would be the Anson Burlingame Public Art Project. And then we also were able to accept the Robert Berry Awards that will go out on the Bayfront. However, when we went through, in particular, the Anson Burlingame, it was very different than just accepting a piece of art that somebody had said to us, hey, we have this and would you like the city to take it? Or it was something the developer wanted to include as part of their project. So what more recently has happened is that the Community Development Department has been working on the North Rollins Road specific plan. And what part of that plan incorporates, and it's a draft plan that will be coming to council in future months. But one of the things that they talked about for public art is a fee or an in lieu, not a fee. Either the developer has to put in public art or pay an in lieu fee that would allow for public art in that area. It does not talk about the rest of the city, but it is a start to how maybe we could incorporate funding sources for public art throughout the rest of the city at a future time. And so the way it works in the proposed North Rollins Road specific plan is that there would be an appointed art liaisons that were either from the city or work in the city who have specialized knowledge in art. And it's something that we learned very well when we went through the Anson Burlingame project, is we as staff and as a commission and even as council sometimes want to dictate how art works. But what we learned going through that process from an art curator who helped us was a lot of what comes with art is what the artist envisions. And so we can give parameters, but the final product is what the artist is envisioning and trying to understand that process. So that's what those liaisons would kind of help our commissions do. So right now, the existing policy is if it's in a park, it gets vetted by the Parks and Rec Commission and it goes to council. If it's in the library, it goes to the library board and goes to council. If it's a development, it goes to the planning commission. And a community development director, Gardner, will have to help me, but I'm not sure if those end up going to council for approval or not.
Typically no, unless the whole application is going to the council, but yeah, usually the art is just, it's part of the design review of a project.
Right. So with the North Rollins Road specific plan, what it does is that art liaison committee of 2, and it could be more than 2, it's just the number we came up with. We thought that would be relatively easy to fill within the city. Because we are not a large city by population, so our pool is a little bit smaller than, say, larger cities. Would work with the planning commission with the acceptance of art, especially if there's in lieu fees. If the art ended up being, if they paid an in lieu fee and the art was going to be specified for a city park, then it would be that the liaisons would help the Park and Rec Commission. If it ended up going in a public space that was not overseen, say, by Parks and Rec, but in a right of way, then the planning staff would look at it to make sure it was appropriate for that location before it went to council. So we're kind of looking at a hybrid. I looked at all the cities around us, and there is no one way of doing it. The bigger cities that have a dedicated funding source have an arts commission that is dedicated for that. They do still work with the different commissions. Say if it was in a park, they would work the Parks and Rec commission to make sure it was appropriate for the space. But one thing we don't have yet is any dedicated funding. The cities that do have a committee but no dedicated funding, they spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to get money to be able to purchase art to put it in a park. And from the staff I talked to, it wasn't, they weren't highly effective unless there's a dedicated source of funding that they can use to put art in the city. So we thought we could propose doing something like a hybrid, and other cities do it the same way. They wait till an opportunity comes up and then they kind of work their way through it, kind of like we did with Anson Burlingame. But I think we'd like to be a little bit more organized going forward with a little bit more structure, and it can still evolve over time. I don't know if there's anything that the city librarian or the community development director would like to add.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Thanks, Director Golomstead. I agree with you. I think, I don't think that we rise to the level of having to have an art committee or council or whatever you want to call it. I think, moving forward, I think we could go with this 2-person program, relook at our art acceptance policy, and bring something back that I think everybody could be pleased with. So that's my take.
Kevin, do you have anything?
Thank you. Yes. Let me add and first also recognize, so some of this has been an outgrowth of the North Rollins specific plan, and I want to recognize council members Colson and O'Brien who have served on the advisory committee for that plan. Some of this art program started with that plan and the interest to introduce art to the North Rollins Road area, and then coming up with a approach to how to administer it, the idea of the liaisons, because there probably wouldn't be that many, 1 or 2 a year if each development project were to have some piece of artwork whether the developer themselves proposes the art or whether they pay a fee, which then the city uses. So that would, that was the thinking, is it's, as Brad mentions, it's, probably doesn't warrant a standing committee because these kind of come as they come, but the liaisons would be a way to provide that advisory role, and then whether it goes to the library, parks, or planning, ultimately city council in some cases, that was the model. And the thinking was that if this pilot program in North Rollins worked, that could be something that would extend citywide.
Thank you. One of the things our existing policy says is that to update it, two commissioners from Park and Rec, Library, and Planning would be appointed to work with staff to propose changes to it to be approved by council. So that is the existing policy. It doesn't mean we have to take that route, but that's as it stands right now. We could have a subcommittee of 2 council members to work with those commissioners. The council could decide to look at it differently because it is an old policy. I mean, there's some very good parts of it, but I think it definitely needs a refresh with what we've learned more recently going through this, because it was very few and far in between that this happened before. But it is open to the council to think about and provide some direction for staff. And we, all 3 of us, are here to answer any questions.
Let's try that again. Thank you very much for your presentation. And with that, I'll open it to colleagues for questions. So colleagues, any questions of our 3 directors? So then Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Well, I take it you'd like to reserve comments for later, Mr. Mayor, is that right? Just questions here?
I keep trying, buddy. I keep trying.
Okay, all right. So my question is this, which is, it feels to me, first of all, I appreciate the work of all 3 directors for supporting and promoting public art. I personally think this is a really great way to promote pedestrian interest, to actually make a city feel younger, but it has to be conscientious. It's not going to just fall from a tree. And so that's really my question. The proposal seems to me, I don't mean this critically, but seems to me to be, how do you vet somebody offering some art or who may have to provide art? My question is slightly different. How do we promote art? How do we get more art into the city? And is that what the liaisons would do, Director Glomstad, or are they really more like a jury? Once you get a piece, then they help figure out whether it's appropriate or something.
I think well, yes, that's part of it. So I think that is how the North Rollins Road specific plan works. Because there's some funding, either they have to provide the art or they have to give money. So there would be an opportunity, if they had the fund, the in lieu fees, then they could go out and figure out what they would use those funds for when they were enough to do something. But it's not, the liaisons were not going to be, and granted, we can write it in we want, but soliciting, people to donate art to the city. What I have found is most artists want to be paid for what they're doing. And that's the hardest thing, is to raise funds for it. So, we could try to see if they could, but right. Yeah, I don't know how that would work.
So let me because I find that very intriguing, your question wrapped up in a comment. So what you're sounding like you're thinking of, Vice Mayor, is some sort of like a master plan for public art that they would look at kind of.
Well, I don't want to impose on not a master plan exactly, because I think Director Glomstad is absolutely right. We learned a lot by doing the Burlingame art installation, how much expertise goes into the art and from the artist. And frankly, we also saw that 10 years ago when we required Mills Peninsula to put up public art in front of the hospital, which was really, I think, the first time we ever did that. And that was an interesting process. So it actually is a process that benefits from professionals being involved. I completely agree with that. And the Burlingame Art Memorial wouldn't have happened without Lance Fung, and his expertise. So, and I realize we're a small city, we probably don't need that. But on the other hand, I think if we just are passive, I think we'll miss some real opportunities. So, but I'm conscious of having spoken a lot, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Councilmember Colson.
Thank you. So I would like to address the question of how to promote art. And I think this is really important because last year I sat down and cataloged our art, and not all of it is like I categorized things like the mural on the side of the Methodist Church as art, the Wurlitzer statue behind Malouf's as art. And I went through and found something like, 45 pieces of art, some hidden, some not as hidden. That didn't include the Anson Burlingame piece, nor did it include all of the beautiful artwork that's been donated by Janet Martin in the studio, and Carl and Janet Martin in the studio shop, and has been put on loan there, as well as even just art galleries, and little art installations. And so one of the things I would love the chamber to do, or maybe the bids, or if we have an intern, would be to create kind of an art walk or an art bike ride. Like if you want to start at the hospital and you want to ride your bike or you want to walk, here's like a map of all the art with like little things about it and how you get to it. You could, how far it is. And I think it would be a fun thing for families to do. I would include like the ferry, even like the ferry houses down in Lyon Hogue. But just the little charming artsy things. And maybe if we could figure out a way to get it kind of quantified, classified, and put into something that people can either download off the website or print off, that might be a way to kind of promote how much art we actually really do have, as well as catalog it, classify it, and explain it to people. Where did it come from? Who paid for it? And it might not be permanent. It might even be rotational.
Okay, so thank you for your question.
Sorry. It says, the question is, Jeopardy, how do we get something like that done as a way to promote art?
Good one. Great. I don't know, Director Glomstead, if you have any comments on Councilmember Colson's question, excuse me.
I think it's a great idea if we had someone go out and look for all that. Just finding the right person who's able to do it.
Okay, colleagues, any other questions? Let's open it to the public, and then we can come back and we'll comment till we're blue in the face. So no more questions. So City Clerk, could you please take us to public comment?
Yes, I have no emails and I don't see any hands up. So you're good to go, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, now we can do comments. Mr. Vice Mayor, why don't you start?
Well, thanks. I've said some stuff already. I really do think this is an opportunity for our city. I think every city who counts on any sales tax needs to find ways for people to come downtown. And I think public art, when you're in a city that has it, and whether it's San Luis Obispo or it's Boise, or, you don't have to be a big city, but it's a conscious decision to try to place things of beauty in, sometimes right in the public eye, sometimes in offbeat places like Councilwoman Colson reminds us. And I just think, but I also think, as we learned with sustainability, when no one was in charge in the city for sustainability, not much happened. And then we hired, a sustainability coordinator, and all of a sudden things start to happen. So I'm not suggesting that we hire an art person before anybody jumps on me, but I do think if we believe that enhancing and promoting more public art is a good thing for the city, then we should be going beyond asking just how do we vet a good piece of art and ask how do we promote more of it. And I realize it does come down to money, and the North Rollins Road was very smart in assessing a fee. But I just think it's an opportunity, and I appreciate that Brad, our librarian, our park and rec director, our city planner do this sort of ad hoc. I guess I feel that a little bit more process where not in terms of vetting, but in terms of promoting would be useful. And I don't know how to suggest that happen, but I think Burlingame would be better off for it. I guess that's where I would leave my comments. So I support this recommendation, but I don't think it goes far enough.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I will have to agree with you on that. And we have so many opportunities for public art coming up that are things that are happening right now that I think that we need to explore that. So yeah, I really appreciate your comments. That makes a lot of sense to me. Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll start by answering the question that staff posed to us tonight. Do we support the idea of these 2 art liaisons that have some art experience and change the process about how we review this using the model for Rollins Road and expanding it citywide? I think that makes a lot of good sense. What we did learn during that Anson Burlingame experience is people who know the industry and have experience bring a lot to the table. And I really like that idea. I would like to say that maybe step 2 would be this 2007 policy really should be updated somehow, as Director Glomstead suggested. So much learning. It seems, when I read it, it seemed so prescriptive, and that is kind of the opposite tactic that Lance taught our committee through that whole process. And I hope we could tap into that brain trust of those amazing volunteers that came forth to help us with that process, who kind of were trained by Lance to maybe have a conversation about what in this policy could be sort of re-envisioned a little bit, maybe a little bit less prescriptive. Those folks were all passionate about art, but the talent in this community, we had 2 professional gallerists involved. We had one of our folks had a master's in public art. It was just amazing what people brought to that conversation. And maybe if that's an ad hoc committee, maybe it's more than the liaisons that are looking at the policy, but maybe it's an ad hoc committee could maybe have a discussion about some of the things that Vice Mayor Brownrigg is talking about. How can we go forth and promote further? But my third point is I do clearly see a priority. We do have to get a revenue stream, and that's where I really look forward to our been talking with our city manager. We're going to have some really good conversations about impact fees coming up in the near future, and I think that's a really important conversation, particularly as we finished our parks master plan, that we can have a holistic conversation about impact fees throughout the city, and maybe art impact fees could take a priority and then get us those revenue streams that we so desire to make great things happen. Thanks.
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Councilmember O'Brien.
Yes, actually, my comments are similar to Councilmember Beach's. Actually, I think Councilmember Beach did a nice job laying out maybe a step process, a tiered process, that you start out simple with the 2 people that focus on, the art, similar to the Rollins Road area, because we do have a lot of community members that can offer their expertise. Then take it to the next step of evaluating the policy, how that policy can be changed, and then looking at revenue streams. I mean, we already kind of did in the Rollins Road area. That doesn't mean we can do it, we can do it everywhere else in the city of Burlingame. So I think you take the baby steps, but you go, once we have the first step settled, go to the next step of policy, and then look at how you can promote art, and then be able to, come up with a revenue stream that we can use, over time to elaborate on the art. I do think though we need to, as Councilmember Coulson mentioned, is develop the baseline of art we do have and where it's located, and the history behind it. Because if you want to educate and influence people to have an appreciation of art, then we need to educate them. And so I think that is a big component of this too.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Brien. I agree with everything you two just said, and I agree 100%. And I think that this should be the first step in moving towards a more holistic approach. I totally agree. So the only one left, Councilmember Coulson, would you like to add anything?
Well, I think everybody knows me. If it's about art, I'm all about it. I love it. In fact, I'm taking art right now at the community center. So it's great. And I really, really encourage us to and support the next steps in this process. It's going to be an evolution, but I think we're going to get there and do something really fun. And, it's one of the fun things that we get to do in this job. And I really hope we can explore that and push it a little more, because it's joyous and it's fun. And so much of what we do is hard and not that fun. So this is, to me, really, really important for everyone.
That's great. I'm looking forward to having an original Coulson in our downtown plaza.
2 more years, my friend.
Okay, Margaret, Brad, and Kevin are directors and librarian. Do you guys have any other questions? Anything else that you want from us?
So I think what I heard is you would like to have this advisory committee, which I will speak with our city manager to see the best way to go about moving that forward. I think maybe once we do have them learn a little bit more and then think about the best way to update the policy. We can always bring that back to you. I do like the idea of having at least 1 or 2 people from each commission that would be overseeing it, go through the process to learn about art in general, because I think that would help in the long run. But we can bring that back, and then hopefully by the time we get that done, there'll be discussions about fees. So that might help inform that policy, which still can be modified in the future when fees, if they and when they become available for public art in Burlingame. Is there anything else?
Now, colleagues, give me a thumbs up. So we're all in agreement with what she said. Yeah, perfect. So yes, you have five agreements with your synopsis. So we're good. I think, yeah, I agree with Councilmember Coulson. This is exciting. This is fun. And I look forward to hearing a lot more about this. So with that, thank you. And we'll move on to item number 11, which is council committee and activity reports and announcements. So colleagues, does anybody have any announcements, anything they want to share with the rest of the class? I don't see any hands going up. So with that, how about future agenda items? We talked about a bunch of different things that were good future agenda items. Does anybody want to propose any, or Councilmember Beach?
Well, before the springtime, with enough lead time, maybe partial pilot programs for our street closures downtown and on Broadway.
I back you 100% on that one. I think that's a great idea. And I think that when we did close the avenue, it was incredibly successful, maybe a little bit too successful, and that's why we shut it down. So I think that we need to explore that again. So I'm 100% with you on that one. Any others, colleagues? So having none, we will move to acknowledgements. We have agenda packets and meeting minutes for the Planning Commission, Traffic Safety, Parking Commission, Beautification Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Library Board of Trustees. And they're available at www.burlingame.org. And with that, we move on to adjournment. So colleagues, do we have anybody we want to remember in adjourning? I don't see any hands raised. So with that, I just say good night and thank you all for a great meeting. I really appreciate all your good conversation. Good night, all.